Fidel didn't go mad because he became a lich. He went mad because of what Sasha did the moment she saw him. Surprise. A sharp intake of breath. And the instinctive step backward. The reflex to run. She recovered quickly, forced her face blank, controlled her body, hid the fear like a mask snapping into place. But Fidel still saw it. And for someone who had just completed the ceremony, whose soul fire was still unstable and burning raw, that single moment hit like a blade. People like to say liches had no emotions. That was a lie, or at least an incomplete truth. Fidel's transformation was fresh. His mind wasn't cold and steady yet. His soul fire surged violently, twisting his thoughts, making everything louder, sharper, uglier. So he broke. After that day, he wandered the northern edge of the Despair Hills like a lost shadow, and the name spread from mouth to mouth. Mad Lich. When Marvin first heard the story, he'd felt a bit of sympathy. But sympathy is easier when the person is a rumor. When Fidel stood in front of him, pale and strange, and still somehow earnest, Marvin found it hard to keep his face neutral. This wasn't a normal necromancer. Fidel had a good heart. Too good for where he lived. Marvin decided to help him, as much as he could. Fidel was still babbling about a proposal, about what he should say, about which words would move her heart. Marvin listened, then asked a simple question. Roses, he said. Wouldn't naturally grown roses wilt if they touch negative energy? Fidel froze. Then his eyes widened like someone had struck him awake. No wonder. He almost shouted it. Sasha's body carries heavy negative energy. The roses never even reached her. They turned to ash on the way. He clenched his fist, face full of sudden hope. So that's why she rejected me. Marvin forced a smile. Definitely not the main reason, he thought. But if this misunderstanding kept Fidel from doing something stupid again, it was worth letting him believe it. Marvin had spent enough time running alongside this chatterbox to know one thing. Fidel was the kind of person who could make strangers feel like old friends in a day. That kind of warmth was rare in a place like the Despair Hills. Probably, Marvin said carefully. And you don't need to rush a proposal. Maybe she doesn't want to see you for other reasons. Fidel nodded, then blinked, suddenly suspicious. How do you know she doesn't want to see me? Marvin shrugged. If she wanted to, she wouldn't send skeletal warhorses to chase you off, would she? Fidel's shoulders slumped. What am I supposed to do? Then he straightened, stubbornness returning. Forget it. I'll try again. I'll move her sooner or later. He lifted his chin like he'd declared war. At worst, I'll become a lich too. Marvin nearly face-bombed. You already are a lich. Fidel waved that away, like it wasn't the point. Marvin sighed. Have you ever heard of a romantic pair of liches walking hand in hand? Fidel hesitated. No. Then try another path, Marvin said, like helping her regain her body. Fidel scratched his head, looking genuinely pained. That's harder than turning into a lich. It was. A lich's body revival was legend tier magic, and even legend liches struggled to gather the materials. Marvin thought for a moment, then said, There's a flower in the Elven Kingdom's forest, north of the 3 ring towers. It's unaffected by negative energy, always blooming, never withering. Fidel snapped toward him. The eternal flower. Marvin nodded. I'm heading near the 3 ring towers anyway. I can bring one back. Fidel grabbed Marvin's hands with both of his, shaking with excitement. Really? You do that for me? I said I would. Fidel looked like he might cry. Then he started rummaging through his things, muttering about gifts and repayment, throwing weird scraps aside like they were trash. No need, Marvin began. Then he stopped, because he saw what Fidel had pulled out. A jade-green leaf, vivid and alive, so full of vitality, it looked out of place in the Despair Hills dead air. Marvin's eyes locked onto it. Nature's leaf. Even in his previous life, even when he wasn't playing Ranger, he knew exactly what that meant. Ranger players treasured those like sacred relics. Fidel thrust it toward him. You look like a ranger. Take this as advance payment. When you bring me the eternal flower, I'll give you more. Marvin swallowed. If it had been anything else, he would have refused. But not this. He took the leaf, careful, almost reverent. Fidel rubbed his hands together, eager. How long will you need? Hard to say, Marvin answered honestly. Then, after a pause, a month. At most. Good, Fidel said, bright again. I'll wait a month. Simple-minded, straightforward, devoted. And Marvin understood, suddenly, why this man's mind had snapped in the future. A heart like that couldn't survive seeing fear in the eyes of the person it loved. Marvin closed his fingers around the leaf. I'll try, he thought. If I can change anything for him, I will. They spent the rest of the time talking. Mostly Fidel talking, Marvin listening. Life stories, strange adventures, awkward love plans. By the time the skeletal warhorses and ghosts drifted away, Marvin finally took his leave. He'd already lost time. He needed to reach the northern exit, Skull Valley. A nature's leaf wasn't just a gift. It was a key. Rangers normally couldn't learn magic unless they followed a god and received divine spells. The old nature god had once been the main path. But after the Second Era, the nature god went silent, and the world tree inherited authority over nature magic. Leaves grew from that world tree, each carrying a fragment of divine privilege. Even if you didn't worship the nature god, you could still learn magic from a nature's leaf. All you had to be was a ranger or a druid. These leaves were rare, controlled tightly by the Migratory Bird Council. How one ended up in Fidel's hands, Marvin didn't know. But he knew its value. He placed the leaf on his palm and whispered a simple ranger incantation, a standard class chant anyone could learn after becoming a ranger. The leaf dissolved into light and sank into his skin. A new skill appeared instantly. Vine metamorphosis. You can turn part of your body into a barb vine. Usable 3 times per day. Marvin stared at it. That's unexpectedly fierce. Then he read it again and felt a faint heat crawl up his neck. Part of the body, which part? Marvin coughed once, annoyed at himself. The nature god really did match the myths. Bold, wild, and completely shameless. With his first spell acquired, Marvin pushed north in a much better mood. The road stayed quiet. No more ghost uprisings. No strange waves of fear. But just before Skull Valley, he ran into trouble again. A necromancer apprentice. The man stepped out of a graveyard off the path with 12 skeletons trailing behind him, like he was drilling his control. The moment he saw Marvin, he didn't speak. He pointed, and the skeletons charged. Typical necromancer behavior. Hostile to humans by default, nothing like the oddity that was Fidel. Marvin didn't hesitate. He drew his daggers, ice cold. If it were a second-rank necromancer, it would be dangerous. But an apprentice trying to act arrogant in front of him, that was suicide. Marvin stepped forward and kicked the first skeleton hard, his curved dagger flashing with a clean, cold arc of light. 12 skeletons. That was it. A small pack. Most summoning classes hit a hard ceiling at 6 summons. Once you reached the limit, you either dismissed something or you stopped. Necromancers didn't play by that rule. Give them enough corpses, enough ghosts, and enough spell slots, and they could keep piling obedient monsters onto the field until the ground looked like a graveyard army. That was why people feared them. Even a strong expert would hesitate if the enemy could drown him in numbers. But an apprentice? An apprentice necromancer wasn't terrifying. Marvin sized him up in a blink. Level 3, maybe 4. He can summon 12, but his control is sloppy. And he thinks this is enough to kill me? Marvin almost laughed. He dropped low and drove his curved dagger into a skeleton's right kneecap with a clean reverse stab. Crack! Bone splintered. The skeleton lost balance and collapsed. These weren't Blue Bones warriors. Not even close. Just cheap skeletons that hadn't even hit level 2. Too slow. Too stiff. Too weak. Marvin moved like a storm through them. Steel flashed. Bones flew apart. Their swings couldn't touch him. Their speed couldn't match him. And their numbers meant nothing when they couldn't land a hit. In under half a minute, the entire pack was scattered into pieces across the dirt. The apprentice necromancer stared like his world had shattered. "You how?" He stuttered, pale with fear, then turned and ran. Marvin didn't let him. One long step, then another. His pace surged, and within a few breaths he was right behind the fleeing necromancer. When the man suddenly spun around, eyes vicious, and fired a streak of dark light from his finger. First circle spell, Ray of Darkness. Get hit, and you got cursed with a random disease. It wasn't always lethal, but it was always a problem. And Marvin's constitution was a pathetic 9. He couldn't afford that kind of weakness. Shadow steps. His left foot slammed the ground. Without breaking forward momentum, he shifted half a body width to the right. Whoosh! The black ray sliced past his ear. He dodged. The necromancer's lips curled into a nasty smile. Can you dodge twice? He lifted his other hand and fired again. Another ray of darkness. But this time it came through a ring on his second hand. Close range. 2 shots in a row. On paper, it was perfect. If Marvin got clipped even once, the necromancer would have spaced to change spells and finished the job. Except Marvin didn't think. He reacted. His right leg kicked the ground, and he shifted left in a mirror of the first movement. Same timing, same sharp angle. Whoosh! The second ray missed too. The apprentice necromancer froze, stunned beyond belief. He dodged both? Marvin didn't give him time to process it. He lunged in and crossed his blades with brutal precision, carving straight for the throat. Cutthroat, 46, activated. Critical hit. Target eliminated. 49 battle EXP gained. The necromancer tried to pull back, tried to save his neck, but the motion was too slow and Marvin's cut was too clean. He died without ever understanding how Marvin had slipped twice in a row. Marvin exhaled hard, chest rising and falling. Those dodges had cost stamina. Real stamina. That was the ugly truth about fighting spellcasters. Even an apprentice with a first circle spell could force him to go all out. He wasn't winning by tanking. He was winning by not getting hit. The first dodge had been the actual shadow step skill. The second wasn't. It was technique. Most right-handed fighters naturally push off their left leg to shift right. Marvin did that too, but he'd trained the reverse as well. Right leg push, shift left, same speed, same explosiveness. He'd drilled it until it was muscle memory. Not a skill, but close enough to look like one. Still, the price showed immediately. A sharp pain shot through his right leg. A mild sprain. This body still can't handle explosive movement for long. Marvin clicked his tongue and knelt beside the corpse. He didn't want to linger. An apprentice had a master somewhere, and necromancers didn't forgive. He looted quickly. The necromancer was poor. No real coin. The only valuable item was the ring. Marvin inspected it. Same idea as a powered staff. It stored a spell and fired it on use, but it was cheap work, and it couldn't be recharged. Still, one more ray of darkness in my pocket. He slid it onto a finger of his left hand. The rest was trash, beginner necromancer books he didn't need. Then he found something that made him pause. A sheepskin scroll, a standard Despair Hills pass. Marvin's eyes narrowed with pleased surprise. So the apprentice wasn't alone. He belonged to a group. With this pass, Marvin could move in and out of the Despair Hills far more freely. He packed what mattered and left the corpse where it fell. Necromancers desecrated the dead as a profession, and this one had attacked first. Marvin felt zero guilt. Later, walking the narrow paths of the Despair Hills, Marvin skimmed through his battle logs. One message made him stop. You repeatedly used other classes' movements in battle. Personal specialty progress. 100 out of 100. A relevant personal specialty has formed. Personal specialty acquired. Versatile. Marvin's eyes widened. Versatile. Even in his previous life, he'd never gotten that. And now it dropped into his hands because he'd become a ranger and kept borrowing movements from other styles. The description was simple. The meaning was insane. Versatile. You can gain one additional secondary class. Your first secondary class does not suffer experience penalties. In Feinan, class restrictions were brutal. One main combat class. One secondary combat class. That was the limit. And picking a secondary usually came with a painful experience penalty, but people still did it because extra skills could save your life. Now Marvin had something better. An extra class slot, and the first one was penalty-free. It was a massive advantage. And then the excitement faded into a different feeling. A problem. Marvin frowned. All right, so what do I take as my secondary class?
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
The matter of the secondary class was very serious because once you picked a secondary class, you couldn't change it. Marvin was knowledgeable enough that in an instant, he thought of 6 outstanding secondary classes. Every one of them could perfectly match with Nightwalker. If it wasn't for the universe magic pool being destroyed, the wizard class would have been the best pick. Unfortunately, Marvin didn't dare to choose the wizard class. In half a year, non-wizards would be slightly affected, but wizards would be in the middle of the calamity. Even if he wanted a wizard secondary class, Marvin would wait until after the collapse of the universe magic pool and then pick one of the new kind of spellcasting being pioneered by mankind. Thus, the current wizards didn't enter his sight. As for the remaining classes, getting the class itself would be no less troublesome than getting the Nightwalker class. I'll settle the things I have to do first and then take care of the secondary class after upgrading my main class, Marvin decided. He really had too much on his hands, and it would take some time. Fortunately, there was still some time before the universe magic pool collapsed. Marvin didn't meet another necromancer after killing that apprentice. His luck wasn't bad, and he smoothly arrived at the northern Skull Valley. This was a region similar to the Ghost Valley. Without the pass, Marvin could only use Heist's spellbook to try to trick the low-level Ghost Guard. But he had a pass now. He simply left the Despair Hills. It was a lot more convenient. The sky was still dark after he left the Despair Hills, seeming like the sun had just set. Marvin estimated that he had been in the Despair Hills for a day or so. He entered at dawn and left at dusk. This was really lucky. He hadn't suffered any loss. The next path would be slightly easier, but Marvin decided to rest for the night, because Marvin would enter the territory of an expert. Few people in the surroundings knew of his existence because he used dense fog, illusionary voices, and other spells to create an unusual environment. If he didn't take the initiative to make the first move, very few people could bother him. But Marvin was getting ready to pay him a visit. Even though the other side wouldn't do anything to hurt him, he still needed enough energy to deal with everything after that. A nap will be good. This body's constitution is too bad. The stamina is already quite lacking. Marvin lied down in a hole inside a dried-up tree. He ate some rations, drank some water, and fell asleep shortly after. The next morning, Marvin kept going north. Outside of the Despair Hills was a small basin, and in the center of that basin was a foggy forest. Marvin was standing on a small hill, watching the area. It was noon, yet the forest was filled with fog. The Moonlight Forest was north of this basin. It was part of the Elven Kingdom, home of a few wood elves, mostly merchants. The trip from the Moonlight Forest to the Three-Ring Towers only took half a day because of the hot air balloon. I'm good on time. Marvin went down the hill and decided not to avoid the foggy forest. In fact, he went in without asking. The forest was extremely quiet, and not a sound could be heard. Apparently, all the animals were scared into hiding. The further he got, the more dense the fog was. From Marvin's feet, it gradually reached Marvin's waist. Should be close. Marvin gently touched a tree. The abnormal feeling made him smile. This didn't feel like a tree. Even though sight confusion was very effective, the sense of touch was the weak point somehow. He suddenly took out a black bandage and covered his eyes. He kept moving forward like this for 2 hours, until a deep voice echoed beside his ear. Seems like you have seen through my small maze. Intriguing ranger, take off your blindfold. Let me take a look at you. It was standard common language. Marvin took off the blindfold. His surroundings had completely changed. The dense and hazy forest had turned into a mountainous rock cluster. There was also a huge cave not far from there. The rest was completely deserted. Oh, it walked past me. Marvin noticed he was facing the wrong direction and quickly turned around. On top of a huge rock lay a huge monster. The other side looked at Marvin with a lazy sort of expression, its wings covering his body. His tail happily swung twice. This meant he was in a good mood. This was a red copper dragon. Marvin smiled. He was too familiar with this guy. Professor, an ancient red copper from times immemorial. He had a legend-level strength and a very kind heart. Among all dragons, red copper dragons always had a good reputation. They fed on metals and ore. Very few would injure living beings. They like interesting things, especially riddles. Most wandering bards would be welcomed by red copper dragons because they would bring stories from faraway places. Rangers would also receive the approval of red copper dragons, especially Marvin after he used a simple technique to break the red dragon's maze. That's right, the center of the basin was actually a small hill. It was only the red dragon using a few tricks and turned that hill into a forest with dragon spells, at least in appearance. But the red copper dragon's mazes weren't flawless. They had been cracked by Marvin repeatedly in the past. The current professor didn't look injured from the blow from that ancient red dragon living on a neighboring volcanic island. He still looked very lively. "Hello, Ranger." The red copper dragon amber, I blinked. It seemed curious. "How did you see through my maze?" Marvin laughed mysteriously. "Will you accept my challenge if I tell you the answer?" Challenging me? The red copper dragon wasn't angry. He was actually interested. "Sorry for being blunt. You aren't my opponent. I only need to use a bit of strength to crush you." The red copper dragon seemed very sincere, extending a huge claw and imitated a swing, as if telling Marvin that as a red copper dragon, he was very powerful. "Of course I'm not your opponent." Marvin laughed and said, "No, I'm thinking of challenging myself. I heard your reputation from a wise man. I heard you were wise and witty. Thus I dare to look for you. I want to challenge your mirror world." "Intriguing, intriguing," the red copper dragon murmured. He nodded, saying, "Mirror world is very dangerous. Are you sure you want to challenge it?" "Of course," Marvin replied. "I came for this in order to hone my skills. I can tell you now. The reason I was able to see through your maze was because no tree in this world feels like a rock." The red copper dragon laughed. "So, it was that. Looks like it's not a big deal. Next time I'll add a confused perception." "I guess I won't find you next time," Marvin said. "If your performance in the mirror world pleases me, I'll allow you to come in." The red copper dragon flung his tail to catch a piece of ore and swallowed it. "I like warriors daring to challenge themselves. There are too many wizards in this world. They are cowards who would never do anything unless they were 100% certain of success. No wizard ever entered my mirror world. Please wait a moment. I'll make a mirror image of you. I'll also add a reward at every level for you. Stay here. It'll start 10 minutes later." Then the fog slowly rose and covered Marvin. Marvin took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and silently counted. That ancient red copper dragon's mirror world was a place for brave people to continuously challenge themselves. If one didn't pay attention, they would lose their life. But it was also very attractive. Defeating yourself in the mirror world would constantly hone your skills. For Marvin, it was to increase his dagger mastery level. And each time he defeated an opponent, he would receive a professor as reward. Red copper dragons loved to collect treasures. His reward would surely be something good. The fog enveloped Marvin, and time quickly passed. Soon, the 10 minutes were up, but the expected enemy didn't appear. It seemed somewhat different. Marvin was surprised, but he immediately got on guard. The red copper dragon would never lie. He said 10 minutes, so it was 10 minutes. In that case, he was already in the mirror world. Marvin felt a strong sense of crisis. He almost instinctively swung his dagger while turning around. It was completely empty. There wasn't anything. But Marvin knew that it had already arrived. Rangers could stealth. Cunning indeed. Marvin looked all around the thick fog, frowning. This was a bit fishy. Based on the game's circumstances, the enemy shouldn't be this cunning. They would normally directly rush to fight. Really, the game and reality have some differences. Marvin took a deep breath and focused. He didn't expect to lose his advantage right off the bat. It was quite inconvenient. The mirror world was a place where class holders challenged themselves. This place didn't allow anything else apart from skills and weapons. And Marvin's enemy was a clone of himself made by the red copper dragon. This copy roughly had the same attributes and fighting strength. The first layer's clone had the same level of dagger mastery, beginner level that is. As long as it was defeated, Marvin's dagger mastery would gain 1 level. It would reach intermediate. After intermediate was expert, and after expert was master. That Shadow Spider's Dark Murderer had a master level dagger mastery. It was mainly because of this that he could overpower Marvin. When he used daggers, even if they did the same blow, his attack power would be at least 60% stronger. This was the strength of weapon mastery. Marvin was quite familiar with daggers, but was far from having that kind of expertise. This time he would make use of his past experience to properly raise his dagger skills. And the Red Copper Dragon's mirror world was the quickest way to do it. Marvin silently clenched the curved dagger in his hand. Every 3 seconds, he would turn in one direction. His perception was a bit low. Although he had points and listen, Marvin knew that with his own perception, it would be quite difficult to notice his own stealth. And the mirror world's enemy was basically himself. Defeating oneself has always been a very difficult matter. The Red Copper Dragon Professor was fond of finding fun things. He also appreciated those who were brave enough to challenge themselves. He thus created the mirror world. Seems a little unfair. The Red Copper Dragon outside, the mirror world grabbed a piece of, and swallowed it. He burped and said, "Using my fighting consciousness to bully a newborn ranger. Although this guy deserves praise for his courage, it's a bit too much for him." He then stopped controlling the clone inside the mirror world and picked the magic intelligence. This kind of spell simulated intelligence. It was naturally a lot weaker than the Red Copper Dragon controlling the mirror world. Marvin inside the mirror world naturally was unaware of this. He simply felt something move behind him. Getting impatient this quickly, Marvin was a bit surprised, but he didn't move. He had already started tracking the sound of the other side's footsteps. Marvin was clearly aware of the distance his own shadow step could reach in an instant. Thus, he simply pretended to be unaware of the other side. Almost close enough. It's this step. In an instant, Marvin took a step forward. The next instant, a shadow burst out from the fog. That person looked exactly the same as Marvin, and the curved dagger in his hand was also similar. Shadow step. Sure enough, as Marvin expected, the mirror image's first move was shadow step. It ruthlessly arrived at Marvin's previous location. If Marvin hadn't dodged, the next move would have been a frightening cutthroat. What Marvin once used on enemies was now used against him. Unfortunately, this isn't enough. Marvin sneered and smoothly turned around, twin daggers ruthlessly swinging. After using shadow step, the mirror image was clearly immobile for an instant. Not moving was a huge gap in Marvin's eyes. Even if both sides' strength were totally identical, their fighting knowledge weren't on the same level. In addition, there are some things that attributes can't reflect. After his mirror image exposed itself, Marvin clearly knew that the outcome of the battle had already been set. Clang! Clang! Curved daggers kept colliding inside the mirror world. Marvin's smooth and unrestrained assault made the mirror image unable to strike back. 1.5 minutes later, Marvin successfully killed the mirror image. Even if that guy looked like him, Marvin wouldn't show mercy. After the curved dagger cut its throat, the mirror image turned into a lump of earth before falling apart into sand, splattering everywhere. Congratulations, you passed the first floor. In fact, clearing it in such a short time amazes me. Regardless, the second floor's mirror image will be many times more frightening than you imagine. But first, I'll give you your reward. The surprised voice of the Red Copper Dragon came from the outside of the mirror world. He hadn't expected that Marvin would manage to kill the mirror image just when he was distracted. Was magic intelligence too stupid? What should I reward him with? The first floor reward shouldn't be too big. But for this kid to show that kind of display, I have to show my generosity. The red copper dragon pondered for a moment and then took out something out of nowhere. You defeated a mirror image and won against yourself. Your skill has been honed in battle. Dagger Mastery +1. Your Dagger Mastery level rose. Intermediate. Marvin meticulously examined the battle logs. He also checked his Dagger Mastery. It really leveled up. Marvin's grasp on his twin daggers suddenly felt a lot more comfortable. His attack power rose by at least 5%. This was the benefit of leveling up weapon masteries, especially for those melee classes. The fog slowly receded, leaving a treasure chest behind. Marvin knew it was the red copper dragon's reward. He opened the treasure chest. To his surprise, there was a book inside. Skill book. It's actually a blade technique. Marvin was a bit surprised. He had been worrying about not having time to learn a few skill books, especially blade techniques. He definitely remembered the blade technique from that dark murderer. Blade techniques were what he needed the most right now. They would maximize his superior skills with daggers. The red copper dragon rewarded Marvin with this book called Blade Technique Rapids. It was the most basic kind of blade technique, and Marvin could now decide to practice it. Because of Dagger Mastery, any blade technique could be learned and then turned into Marvin personal skill. As for the level of skill, it depended on Marvin's level of understanding of the skill. This field seemed a bit related to intelligence. Blade Technique Rapids, one of the basic blade techniques. You can slightly increase your attack speed for a long time. It's a bit average, but better than nothing. Marvin put away the Blade Technique book. Compared to the Dark Murderer's Blade Technique, Rushing Thunder Slash, Blade Technique Rapids was a bit weak. Rushing Thunder largely increased attack speed for a short time, while Rapids slightly increased attack speed for a long time. It looked like each had their own strong points. But in fact, Rangers, and especially a dual-wielding Ranger, look for a short-term burst of strength. But since it increased attack speed, it could be considered as another hand in battles. Better than nothing anyway. Marvin, with his current lack of resources, couldn't afford to be picky. Why haven't you learned that skill immediately? A curious voice could be heard, coming from outside the mirror world. Because I want to continue my challenge. Marvin calmly added, if I learn it now, the next mirror image would definitely know this blade technique. I think that not learning it is better. Smart youth. The red copper dragon let out a satisfied burp. Careful, the second floor mirror image has 120% of your ability and also a Dagger Mastery 1 rank higher. As the professor's voice faded, a shadow appeared inside the fog. This shadow was the same as the one before. But Marvin felt a thick, killing intent from the shadow. It didn't choose to use stealth or hide, but instead a direct assault. In that instant, Marvin even had the feeling of fighting Blackjack again, definitely controlled by the red copper dragon's consciousness. Clang! Both sides collided, and Marvin immediately felt that this opponent was out of the ordinary. Mirror Image 2 is not only had 120% of Marvin's abilities, it also had an expert-level dagger mastery. What was even more frightening was that an ancient dragon was controlling it. Even though Marvin guessed that the red copper dragon wouldn't shamelessly go all out, instead using roughly a tenth of its battle consciousness to control this mirror image. But that was already enough for Marvin to eat the dust. Mirror Image 2 was very clever and very vicious. He understood his own difference in strength with Marvin. He didn't need to stealth and would engage in a direct battle. This made Marvin quite uncomfortable. He had to keep dodging to avoid the opponent's fierce attacks. It looked like his fight with Blackjack in the basement. But this time, Marvin's suppression wasn't as powerful. He could still occasionally strike back, just not often. The speed of the other side's dagger was faster than his own. This made Marvin very gloomy. Meeting an expert with dexterity that reached the threshold was what he was most afraid of. Not someone with impenetrable defenses, because even if he was facing a shield bearer with unrivaled defenses, he could still rely on his high dexterity to escape unscathed. But when facing someone with a higher dexterity, when Marvin killed, he relied on speed to win. So facing someone faster than him was very troublesome, because his biggest advantage had already been suppressed and instead turned into the enemy's advantage. Clang! Clang! Both sides' curved daggers kept meeting each other. In addition, Marvin kept using every kind of skill to try to pry the daggers out of the mirror image's hands. But every time, the mirror image would slyly dodge. This was completely due to suppression. And on top of that was the ancient dragon's 10th of battle consciousness. Even if it was far from equal to Marvin's, because both sides were limited to a lower-level body, the former was still dominating. Too depressing. Marvin rolled, increasing the distance between both of them. He understood Mirror Image 2 a bit after the previous exchanges. That guy was a bit troublesome. The main reason was the red copper dragon's battle consciousness. Or else, even with the attribute suppression, Marvin had all kinds of methods to exterminate it. In the game, when players went through tempering in the mirror world, it was purely magic intelligence. At most, it would be a high-level magic intelligence. When did this ancient dragon personally control it? That completely shameless piece of leather. Marvin was originally ready to reach master-level dagger mastery in one breath in the mirror world. His original plan was even to pass 3 levels. But it seemed like it wouldn't work now. His strongest skill was originally set aside for Mirror Image 3, but he probably had to use it now, or he would be unable to defeat Mirror Image 2. After using this skill, the red copper dragon would definitely notice it. Thus, Mirror Image 3 would also possess Marvin's skill. Then he would be unable to do anything about it. It was bringing his own destruction. 2 floors, just 2 floors. In the end, there are still some variables. Marvin wasn't one to hesitate, and he immediately made a decision. Mirror Image 2 on the other side didn't want to let him off, and overbearingly rushed over. Marvin took a deep breath, having already used a lot of stamina. He undoubtedly was the one that lost the exchanges. Let's do it! The curved dagger in Marvin's hand suddenly revolved in a circle. This small pattern didn't attract Mirror Image 2's attention. A ruthless slash made its way to Marvin. Shadow Step. Using the move, Marvin forcefully moved half his body to the right. Mirror Image 2 sneered, suddenly coming close. It was the same Shadow Step. With 2 people having the same Shadow Step skill, the first one to use it would definitely land in big trouble. Indeed, he's still a young guy. What a pity. The red copper dragon outside the mirror world talked to himself. Seems like it's finished. It's close to bedtime. After Mirror Image 2 used Shadow Step, its dagger nearly pierced the back of Marvin's head. Even if the red copper dragon was kind-hearted and would normally not injure a living being, the inside of the mirror world was an exception. Only in the border between life and death could one truly understand the real meaning of fighting skills. Thus, the challenger had high chances of dying. Each person who entered knew this part. Marvin naturally also knew. He dared to enter, dared to challenge. It proved that he was completely certain. After all, this wasn't a game. It was reality. Death was really death. There was no cure for it. In an instant, his foot touched the ground. His ankle almost turned 90 degrees. All the power focused on his right leg and burst out once again. He copied Shadow Step. In an instant, both sides' positions were changed, and Maven ended up behind Mirror 2. Cutthroat. Target eliminated. Bang. Bang. Mirror Image 2 also turned into quicksand and splattered on the ground. The red copper dragon outside the mirror world shivered. How could that be? This wasn't a skill. Wow. Shadow Step. This ingenious step. This guy can actually use it with both feet. Highly interesting indeed. Hee. I must add this feature to Mirror Image 3. I like to see how many cards you hold. But surprisingly at this time, Marvin suddenly said from inside the mirror world, "Respected Red Copper Dragon, I choose to end my challenge." It was very hard for me to reach the second floor. This victory was a fluke. And I also think I might have wounded myself. He pointed to his right foot. Indeed, continuous use of Shadow Step followed by the imitated Shadow Step in 24 hours brought great pressure to Marvin's leg. His ankle ached. This was the problem of his low constitution. He relied on his strong willpower to use his strength. It also was a huge burden on himself. The Red Copper Dragon on the mountainous area seemed somewhat spirited. "You're really clever. I like clever people. Not continuing the challenge is a very sensible thing, because you would surely die in the third floor." His mood wasn't bad, and he unexpectedly used a treat illness on Marvin. Dragon spells were different from common spells. They formed a system that didn't use the universe magic pool to cast spells. Thus, after the universe magic pool's collapse, dragons weren't really affected. Treat illness had a really strong effect. Marvin felt that more than half of his stamina recovered. The right leg sprain also seemed good, very good. "Thank you," Marvin genuinely said. There are very few legends that are this approachable. The Red Copper Dragon Professor was a very rare one. In the game, players had always loved this kind-hearted Red Copper Dragon. It was a pity that after the Professor and the nearby ancient Red Dragon broke out in an intense conflict, both sides suffered and were then attacked by the sneak attack of a god. It was indeed that Shadow Prince. This guy roamed around and very often came out during the era of turmoil. He was at least among the top 3 most shameless gods. He frequently used his godly identity to mount a sneak attack on a legend, killing them or inflicting heavy losses. The amount of legends he attacked could be counted on 2 hands, including East Coast legend wizard, Anthony, 3-Ring Towers legend wizard, Hathaway, and others. After that, the Red Copper Dragons disappeared from people's sight. Up till Marvin transmigrated, he never heard news of the Professor. Maybe it really died from the Shadow Prince's sneak attack. After defeating Mirror Image 2, Marvin successfully leveled up his dagger mastery to Expert. Even if it wasn't the master level he wanted, Marvin was still satisfied with this outcome. In addition, the Red Copper Dragon's reward was very good. It was a pair of curved daggers. Marvin just happened to be short a pair of curved daggers. These curved daggers were named Fong. Fong. Quality, uncommon. This was a pair of decent curved daggers. At least the stats were pretty good. As an uncommon item, it should be considered middle grade. The armor break attribute was very useful after all. The other hidden attributes would have to wait. It took a high appraisal level to see through them. But based on Marvin's experience, and after a short examination, the initial estimation was that the material used for these daggers was pretty good. They were durable and the edge was pretty sharp. The only shortcoming was that they hadn't been used in a long time. They weren't even oiled. This was the consequence of a lack of maintenance. After receiving the daggers, Marvin first started doing some simple maintenance, making them even sharper. The friendly Red Copper Dragon gave Marvin a pair of scabbards. The scabbards were made from some unknown leather. They felt very soft and were very suitable to sheath the sharp curved daggers. Marvin rested for a bit in the Professor's territory before bidding farewell to this kind-hearted Red Copper Dragon and continuing his journey north. It only took a bit over half a day after leaving the mountainous area before he arrived at the Moonlight Forest. The Moonlight Forest was part of the Wood Elves Kingdom. It seemed to have been an agreement between the original Elven Kingdom and the 3-Ring Towers wizards to have this place as a frontier. This was equivalent to a Wood Elven outpost in the south, also acting as a buffer zone between the elves and the humans. There were some half-elven villages scattered there. In fact, half-elves were very unwelcome. Elves definitely rejected them, and humans looked at them differently. Thus, adult half-elves usually had their own villages. The elves in Moonlight Forest were mainly merchants in charge of dealing with the surrounding human forces and considered talking as reasonable. They were different from some conservative elves living deep in the Elven Kingdom. They still hadn't forgotten the glory of the High Elven Second Era rule. They had always considered mankind as the lowest kind of life form, comparable to gnolls and kobolds. The Moonlight Forest had close ties with the three ring towers in the north, with two hot air balloons flying every week in direction of the three ring towers. Hot air balloons were dwarven technology, but were reproduced by the three ring towers' wizard craftsmen. They were used daily in the three ring towers and the surroundings. You could always see hot air balloon caravan in the sky. This was considered a unique East Coast scenery. Marvin was a bit unlucky when he arrived. The relay station's hot air balloon had just flown away. He could only endure and wait for the next one. Marvin managed to buy a ticket very easily after showing his Baron emblem issued by the South Wizard Alliance. Nothing happened while waiting. 3 days later, Marvin was sitting in a hot air balloon on his way to the three ring towers. A day and a half later, Marvin successfully arrived in the three ring towers region. A sharp tower was getting increasingly closer. Under the control of a somewhat low-level wizard, the hot air balloon slowly landed onto a vast open space. Finally arrived at the Ashes Tower of the three ring towers. Ashes Tower was huge, and Magor Academy was but a small part of it. After Marvin got down from the hot air balloon, he followed the signs toward Magor Academy. He soon arrived in front of the academy, but he still needed to line up to enter the academy. There was a checkpoint in front to verify each visitor's status. What day is it? So many people are visiting Magor Academy. Marvin was stunned by the number of visitors. A lot of those people seemed wealthy. They should be nobles from the nearby East Coast. They were followed by their whole family. A family with more than 10 people definitely had a young child. Turns out it's almost time for the apprentice recruitment. Marvin suddenly realized. No wonder there were so many people today. He had no other choice but to endure and wait. Magor Academy was Ashes Tower's apprentice wizard nurturing ground. Like the other academies, it was in charge of receiving apprentices with magical talents from the South Wizard Alliance and training them to be qualified wizards. Marvin's younger brother Wayne had to leave White River Valley to study in Magor Academy because of his outstanding wizard aptitudes. When Wayne took a trip home after their father's death 6 months ago, the Marvin from back then had yet to notice anything strange. That 9-year-old younger brother had already displayed intelligence and a way of thinking that didn't match his age. He never complained to Marvin. Actually, Marvin had guessed that Wayne must have been the target of bullying in Magor Academy. White River Valley was quite small, and they could barely afford Wayne's tuition. And Wizard was a really expensive class. Such a stubborn kid. Remembering that Wayne was so young, yet so strong-willed, Marvin couldn't help but shake his head. He hadn't expected this kind of thing. Did those wizards think that since his grandfather, White River Valley had completely declined? Regardless who acted, Marvin would make them regret. Killing intent flashed in his eyes, and his hands couldn't help but press on the curved daggers on his belt. At that time, next could be heard from the checkpoint in front. My turn? Marvin squinted and quickly walked forward. There weren't many people responsible for checking the visitors. Only one apprentice wizard and 2 fighters. These fighters didn't have a high rank. They were only of the first level and seemed to be followers of that apprentice wizard. This apprentice wore the symbol of Magor Academy, but the 2 followers didn't. He was only in charge of the most simple identity inspection. He would let people pass as long as they proved their identity. This was Magor Academy's self-confidence. In their territory, no one would dare to look for trouble. Baron Marvin from White River Valley? The apprentice wizard sneered from the corner of his mouth. That's right. Marvin seemed very calm. The apprentice wizard was holding onto Marvin's Baron emblem, which was also a proof of identity, as it had come from the South Wizard Alliance. I never heard of that place, the apprentice wizard said. There are a lot of places you haven't heard of. Marvin frowned. Denio, Sova, have you heard of them? The 2 places Marvin introduced were some very dangerous regions of a lower plane, so an apprentice wizard would obviously not understand. What made him quite unhappy was this apprentice's attitude. This guy looks like he knows me. Marvin looked at that apprentice and felt that something was wrong. The apprentice wizard didn't move. It seemed like he trusted his subordinates. Marvin was expressionless, but in his eyes, those 2 fighters were already dead. To Marvin, killing was this simple. These two fighters clearly couldn't progress further due to their mediocre talent, so they chose to become a wizard's followers. This was the nice way of putting it. In fact, they sold their own lives and those of their families to this apprentice wizard. They had to do everything he wanted so that they would be protected by the apprentice's powerful strength. They had no other choice. At least this was a common practice in a lot of places. Wizards had such high status after all, even if it was only an apprentice. These two fighters had excellent equipment. This was the benefit of clinging to someone influential. But Marvin didn't care about those. A fong in his hand suddenly rotated. He took a step forward and threw himself in the embrace of one of the fighters. This movement looked like a fighter's charge, but a fighter's charge could make the enemy dizzy on impact or even stunned. Marvin's copied move clearly couldn't. His copy was also not good enough to get an offer to buy the skill for experience in the battle log and turn it into his own skill. It was fine this way. Marvin rushing right toward them startled that fighter. He started laughing nastily, both hands ready to catch Marvin. But Marvin was like a fish. He lowered his body and sneaked to the fighter's right leg, right below the fighter's armpit. The next second, he kicked off the ground with his left foot and jumped into the air. In the air, he did a 180-degree turn, and, defying gravity, he stuck to the fighter's back. This was a thief battle skill. Marvin was originally very skilled with these kinds of fighting techniques. His legs coiled around the fighter's waist, and he viciously raised his sharp, curved daggers. Two daggers very slyly thrusted into the fighter's shoulders. The armor break effect was released. The chainmail armor's weakest point was captured by Marvin's fangs, directly piercing through the fighter's armor. It was a very bloody scene. The fighter frighteningly shrieked. His shoulders loosened, and both arms were cut down by Marvin. Two arms dripping with blood fell down. The other fighter who was going to surround Marvin was also quite scared. That apprentice wizard's face betrayed a hint of fear, and the audience was also frightened. They didn't think that this seemingly weak youth would behave like that in the Three Ring Towers territory. Furthermore, injuring someone and using such a vicious move. But this wasn't over. This set of moves still had a finishing skill. Marvin loosened his feet, and with a movement of his waist, he forcefully turned his body in the air. Using this sudden, twisting momentum, his right hand's curved dagger moved, leaving behind an icy ray of light. Thud! The curved dagger's swing directly cut at the fighter's head. The head fell on the ground, blood spattered, splashing onto Marvin's face. Marvin was already quite familiar with this kind of warm feeling. Thus he was very calm, carrying the same emotionless expression. But the other people were all in panic. Heavens! This kid is actually killing at the door of Magor Academy. What child? This is clearly the most ruthless assassin. Martin, protect the young master. Those nobles displayed an alert expression one after the other, and kept their distance from the battlefield. They had come to sign up their kid for school, not to fight. At most, they had a few experts with them. Most of the fighters and followers were left in the surrounding areas of the Three Ring Towers. No one anticipated that someone would kill at the front door of Magor Academy. The last time a violent event happened in the Three Ring Towers, it was because a poisoned dragon mistakenly entered the region. Its outcome was very miserable. The three tower masters came out together. Not only did they kill it in the most cruel way, but they also used its dead body, refining all kinds of medicine, enchanting items, and so on. This youth, regardless of his reasons, might suffer a calamity. This was what people thought. The apprentice wizard was deathly pale, blankly staring as his own follower died in front of him in such a vicious way. This was definitely some kind of provocation. Why are you still distracted? Kill him, he yelled, actually daring to insult Magor Academy's prestige. I'll let you die an ugly death. He then took out a magic staff and aimed at Marvin. Marvin immediately rolled, dodging an overbearing ray of flame. This guy's spell is too obvious. Marvin sneered inwardly, raising his daggers once again, aiming directly at the warrior. The fighter was clearly panicking. He had followed that apprentice wizard for a while and had already been used to an easy lifestyle. Every time he went out, he would make use of the apprentice wizard's identity, and very few people would dare to look for trouble. He had clearly stopped working on his martial skills. Facing Marvin's vicious attack, he didn't know what he should do to resist. He actually directly fell back, wanted to flee, but this was exactly what Marvin wanted. He followed behind the warrior, not going too fast nor too slow. The fighter completely blocked the apprentice wizard's line of sight. "Move, stupid pig. You are obstructing my spells." The apprentice wizard was furious. He angrily stomped his feet. These guys have been in the academy for a long time. As expected, they don't have any fighting ability. He is a waste with the leisure to learn powerful spells, but doesn't know how to use them. No wonder he could only be sent to be a guard here. Since someone wants to frame me, there is no harm in blowing this matter out of proportion. Marvin was calmly dodging a few low-level spells while thinking of several things. These spells were all thrown without any skill, not a thread of battle awareness. If he had been a wizard and the other side was a rogue, he would have 10,000 ways to toy that rogue to death. Wizards were very powerful, at least for now, but it depended on the person. Someone like that guy was basically a good-for-nothing. Suddenly, just as that fighter was distracted by the apprentice's scolding, Marvin used blade technique, rapids. His dagger's speed was slightly increased. This was a slight increase, but it greatly increased Marvin's fighting strength. The fighter sensed danger behind him and hurriedly turned his body to block. However, it was too late. Clang, clang. Even if Marvin's daggers weren't as fierce as Blackjack, they were a lot more precise. The sixth cut easily got the greatsword out of the fighter's hands by cutting his tendons. The seventh slash cut opened the fighter's chainmail. The eighth stab and ninth thrust together ended the fighter's life. The audience shivered. This kind of killing method could only be seen from the best of the best elite assassins. Marvin didn't hesitate at all when attacking. He seemed set on getting rid of this guy. Truly a lawless guy. Is he not afraid of angering the wizards? No one understood what he was thinking. Killing 2 followers was still not enough to Marvin. He wanted to blow this matter out of proportion. Someone dared to slander him. Aha! Did they really think that White River Valley's Bear Marvin was as easy to bully as before? Thus he didn't stop after killing that fighter. Instead, he crouched and used that corpse that was just about to fall to the ground to maneuver and circled around using it as the apprentice's blind spot. The latter was still not clear about what had happened to his follower. He was just very angry, hesitating about whether he should cast a spell or not. That fighter would also get hit. But just as he was hesitating, Marvin rushed over in a demonic way. Shadow Step, a very practical skill. It made Marvin look like a ghost, directly appearing in front of the apprentice wizard. Ah! The apprentice wizard let out a cry and hurriedly aimed at Marvin with his magic staff. Bang! Marvin neatly kicked his staff away. Without a magic staff, his casting speed was doubled at least. What do you think you were doing? The apprentice wizard was still unaware that he was going to die. He still shouted with a stern voice. This is the 3 ring towers. What do you think you're doing? Killing. Marvin answered truthfully. The sinister Fong ruthlessly ran along the apprentice's neck. The latter painfully covered his throat with his hands, pitifully dying on the ground. The audience was thoroughly shocked. He actually killed the wizard. Heavens, that was a real wizard. While everyone was watching, an alarm suddenly resonated in the sky. This meant that Magor Academy's law enforcers were about to set out. They already felt that something was amiss. Marvin stood there and didn't show any trace of panic. Everything was as he expected. Magor Academy law enforcers were also under the supervision of the Ashes Tower, but there was also a stronger power above them. The South Wizard Alliance. Whoosh! Weird lights and shadows lit Marvin's surroundings. It was someone using Pathfinder powder to do a short teleport. The people coming to Marvin had absolute confidence. They set their teleport close to Marvin. Marvin knew how to interrupt this teleport, but he didn't do so. In a short 10 seconds, 6 second-rank wizards with serious expressions appeared around Marvin. Each of them was wielding a magic staff and aiming at Marvin. In the sky, a light flashed, and a witch wearing a pointy hat was sitting on a slowly undulating magic carpet. She coldly said, "Kill him." She clearly saw what just happened, but she didn't think Marvin would be so decisive and ruthless. She wanted to stop it, but she didn't have enough time and could only blankly watch Marvin kill that apprentice wizard. The two followers dying was not an issue, but the apprentice wizard was part of Magor Academy, and this apprentice was charged with receiving visitors today. This was simply a provocation to Ash's Tower's prestige. The second-rank wizard's magic staves flickered with rays of light with different colors. But at this moment, Marvin leisurely took out a medal. He put away his curved daggers and raised the medal. He said with indifference, "I apply for an arbitration. I was slandered. This apprentice wizard had an ulterior motive, trying to frame me. And everything I did was in self-defense. I am Baron Marvin from White River Valley. This is my 9th-month medal." 9th-month medal. When Marvin took out this thing, all the second-rank wizards were stunned. They then helplessly interrupted their casts. The witch on a magic carpet was also astonished and landed. The affair had become very troublesome. The audience also didn't imagine that this seemingly poor noble was actually the owner of a 9th-month medal. 9th-month medal's owners was strictly protected by the South Wizard Alliance. In general, Marvin could use it to request an arbitration and other things. The medal's effects were actually far from its reputation. If you met with trouble, you couldn't count on the South Wizard Alliance to uphold justice. However, this thing might come in handy after you cause trouble. Marvin's medal was passed down from his grandfather. A 9th-month medal could be used 3 times, and White River Valley's previous overlord had treasured this medal very dearly, rarely taking it out. But Marvin was different. He knew the South Wizard Alliance would be done for very soon. If he didn't use it now, it would only be a piece of scrap iron later. What's more, he really needed to make things bigger now to attract many people's eyes. At this time, the use of the 9th-month medal was the most fitting. The witch got off the magic carpet, and with a wave, she got one of her subordinates to step aside. She quickly walked in front of Marvin and used an appraising spell with a stiff complexion. The medal was genuine. Marvin's identity was also genuine. She said with confidence, "You do have the right to apply for an arbitration. However, during that period of time, you'll need to stay in Magor Academy, and you won't be allowed out." In fact, she wanted nothing more than to use a spell and kill this ruthless youth in front of her. But every wizard or witch that wanted to become a member had to make all kinds of oaths to the Holly Tree Throne. To not abuse their authority to injure a 9th-month medal's owner was one of them. Breaking her oath was the same as betraying the South Wizard Alliance. This wasn't a price she was able to bear. "I'll naturally stay in Magor Academy. As a matter of fact, I came here because my younger brother was set up by other people. I won't go anywhere until he wakes up," Marvin said with indifference. "Now, madam, can I go in?" The witch coldly answered, "You can." After saying that, she left a magic mark on Marvin's back to prevent him from fleeing without approval. She then prepared to leave. But Marvin suddenly said, "Hold on. What else do you want?" The witch snapped, dissatisfied. "Arbitration requires a witness. Although there are many people here that could act as a witness, I still wish for someone with a good and honest heart, someone that wouldn't lie, as my witness." Marvin was talking while quickly walking toward an isolated young girl on the side. He smiled at the girl. "Will you testify for me?" The girl was stunned. Her expression changed a few times. Why did he choose her out of that many people? That girl wasn't ordinary. The young girl was extremely astonished. She had 2 pigtails, and her eyes were a bit large. She was wearing a purple skirt and seemed naive and innocent. She hesitated before nodding. Marvin quietly said, "Thank you." Then he left, toward the depths of Magor Academy. Everyone was stunned, not knowing why Marvin had done that. Yet, the female wizard was standing there hesitating, apparently wanting to go and greet that young girl while not daring to. Instead, the young girl walked over and told her, "I'll be his witness. You properly take care of the following process." Saying that, she looked toward Marvin's back, revealing a strange smile. Quite an interesting person. What the young girl didn't know was that Marvin also revealed a knowing smile while walking inside the Magor Academy. Didn't expect to meet her. Fortunately, I noticed that she suddenly appeared after the incident, and there wasn't any magic power fluctuation. Now that I've the Ashes Tower's master as my witness, the outcome of the arbitration is already decided. Sure enough, that little girl Marvin recognized was Ashes Tower's master, Hathaway. Great witch at the peak of 4th rank, half-legend. Hathaway practiced a kind of unconventional shape-shifting skill that could let her change her own age between 6 years old, 16 years old, and 26 years old. This spell that could allow her to change as she wished made players drool. There was a lot of gossip between the male players about Ashes Tower's legend. In short, marrying Hathaway was like having 2 wives. As for the third change, only some people with very peculiar tastes would be interested. In short, this legendary, which who always appeared and disappeared, unpredictably appeared in this situation, making Marvin's plan a lot smoother. The apprentice wizard slandering Marvin was a fact, and since Hathaway was aware of it, she would definitely not make a wrong judgment. This use of the 9th month medal was very worth it. Following the path he remembered, Marvin soon crossed Magor Academy's largest area and arrived at the apprentice dorms. Marvin had once visited Wayne when he was attending school. He still remembered a bit about that. The apprentice dorms were set up on a hillside. There were 6 small paths, each path leading to the entrance of a tunnel. As long as you displayed proof of your identity at the entrance of a tunnel, a domesticated goblin would lead the visitor to the needed room. Soon, Marvin arrived at Wayne's doorway after being guided by a young goblin. He knocked on the door, which was then opened by the old butler. Young Master Marvin. The old butler was shocked. He didn't expect Marvin to arrive such a short time after he sent his letter. You came alone? The butler noticed no one behind Marvin. Yes, that's right. Marvin walked inside and said with a serious expression, I want to see Wayne. Hold on. The old butler pulled him back, his face showing a heavy expression. Young Master Wayne's current situation is very bad. Please be prepared. Marvin nodded. He is in the side room. The old butler pointed to a curtain on the side. Marvin could smell the dense aroma of magic medicine coming from behind the curtain. He walked in without any hesitation. What? An angry voice echoed from the inside of the room. It came from a charming blonde youth. You said that guy was killed? And the killer is that bastard's older brother, White River Valley's Marvin. Isn't he a waste? Someone who didn't even have a battle class. He stood in front of a small black-clothed man. The latter said in a low voice, Young Master White, according to our intelligence, Baron Marvin really didn't get any battle class. Then how did he kill my subordinate along with 2 fighter followers under the gazes of countless people before the law enforcement team stopped him? White looked extremely angry. He got that guy to take care of that matter, but he didn't even manage to settle it. Instead, he lost his own life. That small bastard was already a bother. He didn't expect that the older brother would be this troublesome. I do not know. Maybe there is something wrong with the information. The black-clothed man bowed once again and apologized. I hope young master can understand. A small place like White River Valley is too remote, and our intelligence network hasn't been set up there. No matter how, it's impossible to make a mistake this big. White took a deep breath, displaying a pondering expression. This Marvin isn't as simple as he looks. He is shrewder than his brother. Being able to kill an apprentice wizard and his followers is a proof that even if this guy's strength is of the 1st rank, he is at the peak. Decisively using that 9th month medal, it looks like he makes this affair big. I have to admit he is smart. But in front of the unicorn family, these tricks won't help him. They will instead send him to the underworld. The black-clothed man nodded. The Ashes Tower is in the middle of getting in touch with the South Wizard Alliance's arbitration staff. I guess they will go through a process. It'll be easier to handle the process. White sneered. The arbiter, the judge, switch them with our people. I'd like to see what trick this Baron Marvin could use. Yes, I'll take care of it right away. The black-clothed man immediately withdrew. Meanwhile, in a side room next to the dorms, a dense smell magic medicine filled the atmosphere. There was even some mist in the room. An incense burner was set up by the bedside, emitting some kind of peculiar smell. It had the effect of increasing focus. Marvin silently entered. There was another person apart from the unconscious Wayne lying down on the bed. It was a young girl, looking about 11 or 12 years old. She was surprised to see Marvin coming in. "I'm Wayne's older brother, White River Valley's overlord, Marvin." He introduced himself in a simple manner. "Ah, greetings." A hint of shyness could be seen on the girl's face. "I am Lulu, Wayne's classmate." Classmate? It wasn't that simple, right? Marvin speechlessly looked at the girl and the unconscious Wayne. Feinan's nobles matured very early in that regard. They usually wanted to experience the forbidden fruit at around 11 or 12 years old. Wayne was only 9 and already had a girlfriend? This was too fast. But with the wizard's status being very high, looking for a few women wasn't very hard. Marvin looked at this Lulu girl, an apprentice wizard with the potential of an alchemist. But her talent wasn't high. Thus, progressing any further would be very difficult. Her looks were pretty good, but still not to the point of attracting upper layers wizards. She stood at Wayne's bedside, somewhat pale. "Miss Lulu has stayed to take care of young Master Wayne after he caught the illness." The old butler's explanation arrived just on time. Marvin nodded and thanked her, but he soon changed the discussion. "Miss Lulu, you probably exhausted yourself these days. Since I already arrived, you can go rest as I'll take care of my younger brother." After looking blankly for a moment, she glanced at Wayne, reluctant to part with him. Then she nodded and left. Only the old butler and Marvin remained in the room. The two looked at each other, as the former seemed somewhat surprised by Marvin's changes. That was a kind of spiritual transformation. Even though Anna sent a letter mentioning this, when the real Marvin was standing in front of him, it felt like an illusion. The current Marvin was like his grandfather when he was young. Wise, full of energy, and full of determination. These were essential qualities to be an excellent overlord. "Young Master Marvin," the old butler said in a low voice, "you don't need to be too worried. The Academy's teachers were quite angry. They are working hard to look for the culprit. I believe they'll find an answer soon." Marvin didn't say anything. Rather, he silently looked at Wayne lying down on the bed. A thick blanket was covering his own younger brother. His pale face looked terrible. His cheeks were hollow, and his hair had started to wilt like a withering tree. Marvin frowned. He softly opened the blanket. Wayne's stomach was ice cold, but his heart was still beating vigorously. He would wake up 3 times every day in the middle of the night due to nightmares, and then keep crazily vomiting. The things he keeps vomiting are filthy things, the old butler explained. Toads, poisonous snakes, and so on. I already explained everything in the letter. Wayne's teacher said it could be the work of a twin snake's follower. Marvin calmly covered him with the blanket and slowly shook his head. "It's not a twin snake's follower." "Ah." The old butler was somewhat stunned. "It's not the work of a twin snake's follower. It's someone copying the twin snake's cult's tricks." Marvin's eyes turned cold. "This isn't an ordinary curse. It's some kind of compound curse. On the surface, it looks like the twin snake's cult's hibernation-esque curse. But in fact, under the disguise of hibernation, there is one more curse that's constantly draining Wayne's vitality. He is currently very weak, and I have to immediately remove the cause of the curse." Marvin firmly readied his 2 fists, overworking his brain. Sure enough, it was not the twin snake's skill. This was just a pretense, nothing more. Someone else was behind it, and it was definitely someone in the Academy, and someone close to Wayne. "Hold on." Marvin suddenly raised his head. He seemed to have guessed who. "Magor Academy, in a certain meeting room. I think I found the origin of classmate Wayne's curse." A gloomy voice echoed. "We have to severely punish this culprit." "What did you find?" "The final qualifying round will begin in a week. I'm afraid your apprentice won't be able to take part in it," said a sharp voice. "How come?" The first voice angrily yelled. "Don't tell me that someone openly framed my disciple, openly cursed Magor's apprentice, and everyone standing here aren't the least bit concerned?" Everyone was silent. Finally, a voice broke the silence. "Hanser, since this is your student, you suffered the biggest loss, and you set out. But that person should be a student at our affiliated college, if she wishes dash. If she hands over the antidote to remove the curse, I'll spare her life," Hanser firmly said. Thud, thud, thud. Thud, thud, thud. Someone was knocking on the door. The old butler was surprised. Who would pay a visit at this time? Following Marvin's gesture, he opened the door. A man was dressed in a full set of black clothes and wearing a black hat. It seemed very old-fashioned, but very awe-inspiring. Peak second-rank wizard. Marvin guessed in a split second. He didn't dare to use inspect, as that would simply be an offense to that wizard. It might anger him. He estimated from experience. Sir Hansa, the old butler said surprised. This person is... Hansa was looking at Marvin in an odd way. I am Wayne's older brother, White River Valley's overlord, Marvin. He introduced himself once again. Greetings. We quickly met when Wayne's entered the academy. Seemingly recalling something, Hanser's severe face displayed a slight smile. And you also dare to kill at the gate of Magor Academy. You are the first in 300 years. Someone wants to frame my younger brother. I'll make them pay the price. Marvin's voice was very calm, but exceptionally cold. Even Hanser, this kind of master, couldn't help but take a second look at him. This youth seemed somewhat different from last time. When he heard about Marvin killing at the gate, he thought he was quite hot-headed, but apparently he wasn't. But he didn't come for this. Hanser said, I already caught the culprit that put Wayne in this state. It was his young girlfriend, Lulu, right? Marvin finished his sentence. You knew. Hanser choked. It's not the work of the Twin Snakes cult. Marvin pointed at Wayne's thin face and said, if it was the Twin Snakes cult, Wayne wouldn't suffer that much. On the surface, it looks like hibernation, one of the Twin Snakes cult's trademark curses, which makes the target enter a permanent coma. But hibernation wouldn't kill someone. His heartbeat is also extremely strong, and this isn't a symptom of hibernation. A hint of shock passed through Hanser's eyes. He couldn't help but ask, how do you know? My grandfather was a high-level wizard. Marvin had already prepared his reason. Before setting off, I read through many books in the study, learning a lot of knowledge. You and Wayne are just as smart. It's a pity you didn't have the talent to be a wizard. Hanser nodded. Right, I also felt that some people deliberately imitated the work of the Twin Snakes cult. But how did you know it was Lulu? You should have just arrived. Marvin smiled. Under the disguise of a hibernation curse is another curse that drains vitality. This kind of curse needs at least a week of daily contact and constant chanting of the curse incantation. Wayne is a little antisocial, so he wouldn't stay close with many people for a long period of time. Apart from the old butler, who is left, the only person remaining that had daily contacts with him was his little girlfriend, right? A very logical deduction. Hanser shrugged helplessly. You must be a very capable overlord. Since you are here as well, do you want to join me in visiting the culprit behind Wayne's situation? This is your right. Magor Academy's prison. A young girl was sitting alone on the edge of a fence, looking exceptionally frightened. This prison was set up on a 9-story tall tree. Every branch ended in a wooden prisoner cell, hanging in mid-air. She was looking at the vast black liquid below. If she fell down into this black liquid, she would dissolve, and not even a bone would remain. There weren't many prisoners in the prison because most people that looked for trouble in Magor Academy would die. Just as she was looking around, frightened, the prisoner's cage started moving. She was scared at first, but she soon reacted. Someone is controlling this branch. There were 2 faint silhouettes on a distant platform. The tall silhouette was chanting an incantation, and that branch carrying her began to slowly move. In the end, the prisoner's cage landed on the platform. She saw 2 people standing in front of her as the cage opened. Come out, Miss Lulu, Hanser said in a low voice. Lulu timidly walked out from the prisoner's cage. I don't understand. Why did you do this? Who did I offend? Lulu displayed an innocent appearance. She looked completely clueless. A woman's acting, Hanser surprisingly said before Marvin could say anything. I have to say, I'm deeply impressed by your acting skills. As a second-rank wizard, Hanser had a sense of humor that didn't fit with his outfit. As an apprentice alchemist, why would you do this? You've been with Wayne for more than half a year. Why curse him? Did you really think we, the teachers, are blind? Lulu turned silent. She had already prepared herself for this. But once things really happened, she was still bewildered. She knew that Hanser had enough proof since she had already been put in jail. Anything she said would be useless. I love Wayne. Really. She began to sob. but I really couldn't do anything about it. Looking at him every day was so painful. I also felt like a knife was being twisted in my heart. Someone forced me to do this. If I didn't die, in short, I would die in a very frightening way. I was scared. Thus I did what he said. I didn't expect it to be this serious. I know I'm wrong. I truly didn't want to put him in this state. The girl's weeping became more and more mournful, making people feel pity for her. But it only gave Marvin the urge to vomit, using a pitiful appearance to gain sympathy, trying to come out clean after committing such a crime. An 11-year-old girl could be this shrewd? This cruel world was truly forcing children to mature early. Shut up. Hanser strictly interrupted Lulu's weeping. I only want you to do two things. First, tell us who made you do this. Second, remove Wayne's curse. If you do that, I, in the name of Magor Academy, will pardon your behavior. Hanser's words had an immediate effect. Lulu immediately stopped weeping. Her eyes displayed a hint of hope. Really? Hanser glanced at silent Marvin. Of course it's true, Hanser affirmed. He only wanted his disciple to recover at the moment. The rest, the debt will be written down. No need to worry. Lulu stopped weeping and instead began to sort through her thoughts. She slowly said, Firstly, I actually don't know who. Don't misunderstand. I truly don't know. About a month ago, I got into gambling. In the end, the people schemed and I lost a lot. It was a huge amount, and once Wayne knew, he said he would think of a way. He was quite good to me. I knew this. But how could he find a way? He was struggling to pay for his own studies. There was nothing he could do to help me deal with that debt. The people I owed money to were very frightening. Their power covered all of Magor Academy. I think Sir Hanser might be able to guess. I really couldn't do anything about that debt, and these people drove me crazy. In the end, one of the people in charge gave me an opportunity to settle my debt. She took a break after saying this. It was to curse Wayne? Marvin asked. She nodded timidly. One must admit, even if Lulu's charm could only be considered above average, her pitiful appearance could truly make someone sympathize with her. Who? The name. Hanser firmly said. Blue morphine. That person's name is Earl. Lulu said. Earl? What kind of name is this? It's a nickname at most. Hanser snapped, dissatisfied. I already told you everything I know, Lulu said. Removing Wayne's curse is also very simple. There's a box under my bed. Burning it would be enough. Hanser and Marvin glanced at each other. What's blue morphine? Marvin asked. Hanser stiffened. An organization in 3 ring towers. A group made up of children from great wizard families. Marvin nodded, no longer saying anything. But he kept in mind this Earl nickname. Lulu shouldn't have lied. Since the people behind the scenes wanted to do something like this, they certainly wouldn't reveal themselves. They were ready to use this terrible plan. After all, this was the wizard's domain, and Lulu being investigated was also a matter of course. Sir Hanser. Lulu looked at him, full of hope. I love Wayne. If it wasn't because I was forced and had no way out, I wouldn't have done something like this. Hanser was disgusted, but he still said, in the name of Magor Academy, pardon your crime for the time being. If something comes out during the investigation that you didn't explain beforehand, then the consequences. Thank you, sir. Lulu was overjoyed at the good news. But how could she have expected Marvin to suddenly walk toward her? Hanser looked distracted, apparently wanting to stop Marvin, but he ultimately didn't move. Magor Academy pardoned you, but White River Valley hasn't. Wayne is White River Valley's first heir. I am his older brother, and I still haven't forgiven you. Marvin's voice was very calm, but it made Lulu very frightened. Sir Marvin, I really didn't do it because I wanted to. I really love Wayne. I looked at him suffering like that, and I felt pain as well. For real, I would have burnt the box a week later, and Wayne would have woken up. They only wanted to make him unable to compete. That's all. And he also loved me. Looking at Marvin getting closer step by step, she started talking incoherently. A magic seal had been put on her body, so she had no mean to resist. You said he loved you? Marvin leaned to her ear and whispered, but I don't think you two go well together. The next second, Lulu felt a pain in her stomach. Marvin had ruthlessly kicked her, and the girl fell down from the edge of the platform. She let out a miserable shriek before ultimately falling in the black liquid. Her body and bones were corroded in an instant, only leaving black liquid behind. That scene was simply too frightening. However, Marvin didn't blink once. "Whoever harms my brother must die," Marvin muttered in a low voice before turning around. Hanser looked at him for a long time and then asked, "Why did you not use a dagger?" Marvin walked past him and stopped. Filthy. Marvin wasn't being pretentious. He really thought that killing this woman with his dagger would dirty his weapon. She kept on saying that she loved Wayne, yet she had cursed him. Marvin was already restraining himself by not torturing her to death. Hanser shook his head and actually showed a hint of pity. "Maybe I should have broke the Alliance's law and turned her into a lab specimen." Marvin thought he was already ruthless enough. He hadn't expected this teacher to be even more ruthless. But that said, this Sir Hanser seemed especially protective of Wayne. His disciple suffered such a serious injury. It would have been weird if he hadn't been angry. Wizards have always been lawless. They wouldn't bow their heads to any power aside from the South Wizard Alliance. Hanser had probably been holding back a lot of anger these days. Thus, when Marvin wanted to kill Lulu, he did not stop him, but instead subtly encouraged him. After all, there was no issue with Marvin using his name. Magor Academy pardoned Lulu, but the victim, Wayne, was someone of White River Valley. Marvin also had the authority to punish Lulu. It's just that the priority on this authority came after Magor Academy. After Magor Academy gave up the authority to take care of her, he naturally had the right to exercise his authority. This was the advantage of status. As a noble, even a small noble, Marvin had some benefits. And the Great Calamity would destroy all social order. Marvin would also be a victim. He couldn't do anything to prevent the disaster and could only protect his people. And Wayne's curse, Marvin mentioned. "I'll go settle everything," Hanser replied. "I hope he can still make it to the qualifying round." A hint of worry could be seen on his face. Wayne's body suffered such a great injury that even if he could make it, his strength might be bleak. In any case, the top priority was still removing his curse. The two parted outside the prison. Marvin returned to where Wayne was resting in the dorm. The next morning, the sun slowly rose, illuminating the inside of the room from the window. From the open window came a morning breeze. The strong magic medicine smell was already quite a lot weaker. Wayne, lying down on the bed, slowly opened his eyes. He was still as pallid as before, but he had already begun to regain consciousness. The old butler was at his side. "Young Master Wayne, you wake up at last." The old butler was somewhat moved. Wayne shook his head, suddenly saying, "Brother." Brother came. The old butler looked at Wayne, stunned. "How did you know?" Wayne looked everywhere, but didn't see Marvin, seeming very disappointed. "What about brother? Where is he? I clearly saw him arrive." As it turned out, Wayne wasn't completely unconscious while cursed. Instead, his consciousness was wandering. He clearly remembered Marvin's arrival. "Young Master Marvin, he is now receiving arbitration," the old butler said. "What?" Wayne's eyes widened. "He killed someone at Magor Academy's gates. But fortunately, he used the 9th month medal, so there shouldn't be any issue," the old butler comforted. 9th month medal? Useless. Wayne was very clear-headed. Even if he was only 9 years old, due to this vicious environment, he had quite an outstanding line of thinking. He immediately shouted, "The power of the family behind White is too great. They probably took over every arbitration staff. Brother has no chance of success. Where is he now? I'm going." As he said that, he immediately crawled up from the bed. "But your body..." Hearing what Wayne said, the old butler was startled. He didn't understand these kinds of things very well. "I'm all right. I'm already fine," Wayne firmly commanded. "Bring me there." Ash's Tower's arbitration hall hadn't been used in a long time. But today it was filled with wizards coming from all over the 3 ring towers. They came to see the event. Someone openly killed an apprentice at the gate of Magor Academy. This was a quite novel situation. It was safe to say that that guy should have been screwed. But no one thought that this young noble named Marvin was in possession of a ninth-month medal. Ninth-month medal. This was an honor bestowed by the South Wizard Alliance. Only members of the South Wizard Alliance who rendered all kinds of meritorious services would be able to receive this reward. There weren't that many nobles in the South with that kind of honor. And the reason why it was called the Ninth Month Medal was because the South Wizard Alliance was established in the ninth month. The owners of the Ninth Month Medal were all famous people. Of course, there are also a few declining nobles, such as that Baron Marvin receiving arbitration today. Apart from wizards, there were a lot of nobles in the audience. These people happened to be registering their children, and some even witnessed the scene of Marvin killing. They naturally came to take a look. How was that matter going to end? No one knew the outcome. Marvin stood alone in the corner of a high platform, as if he was isolated from the world. The arbitration process was already finished. Now it was just the outcome of the discussion of a few arbiters sent by the South Wizard Alliance. There shouldn't be any issues, Marvin muttered. When they asked for a witness, the little girl also took the initiative to participate and truthfully describe what she saw. She also mentioned that Marvin had been previously slandered. In this situation, it should be quite easy for the arbiters to judge the situation. But this matter seemed a bit wrong. Those three arbiters have been fiercely arguing all this time. Is it necessary? Marvin frowned. Roughly 10 minutes later, one of the arbiters seemed to compromise. Another one stood and loudly said, "I'll announce the outcome of the arbitration. Baron Marvin openly killed in Magor Academy. Furthermore, he killed an apprentice wizard. This is the highest offense. We recommend this matter to not be appraised by us, arbiters, but through a court. Thus, the outcome of the arbitration is to follow the next process, a trial for Baron Marvin's criminal charges." A trial. These words started an uproar. This outcome was like convicting Marvin. There was clearly an issue with those three arbiters. Everyone, no matter if they were a wizard or a noble, understood something about the details of this arbitration. With the witnesses' substantial testimony, this was still the outcome? According to the arbitration customs, at most it would end up in an economic penalty for Marvin. But the outcome was actually to put Marvin on trial. This meant that Marvin was convicted by the South Wizard Alliance's court. Could it be that this wizard he killed had a huge power behind him? I heard the Unicorn family was involved in this matter. I also heard that this Marvin thought he could run amok with the Ninth Month Medal. The result was crashing straight into a wall. He is screwed. Everyone was discussing. Marvin stood there, his face sinking. Someone was playing tricks. He felt very angry, but he wasn't afraid. A trial? HMPF. He couldn't help but look at that small girl sitting in the witness stand. As expected, her face also displayed an angry look. If she wasn't there, Marvin might have been anxious as to how he could cleanse himself of the criminal charge. But since she was there shouldn't be any issue. He requested for an arbitration from the South Wizard Alliance. These arbiters have probably been replaced. As for the court, it would be the Ashes Towers. The trial would be judged, and he had the Ashes Tower Master on his side, so Marvin wasn't really afraid. At this time, a shout could be heard not far away. "Brother!" Marvin was stunned. He noticed a person walking over with the help of the old butler. That kid woke up this quickly. A smile appeared on Marvin's face. The scene stirred the audience. They apparently knew of Wayne's affair, since Marvin had come to the Three-Ring Towers because of Wayne. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had a reason to leave his territory. Wayne was pale, and his lips were even paler. He ground his teeth and arrived in front of Marvin. Seeing Wayne, Hanser also couldn't stay seated and quickly appeared at Wayne's side. "You need a rest. We will take care of Baron Marvin's matter." "I want to see my elder brother," Wayne firmly said. Hanser helplessly stepped aside. "Kid, I killed your girlfriend. Don't you hate me?" Marvin joked. Wayne saw Marvin standing alone on the stage, about to receive a trial. His eyes immediately reddened. "Don't cry. Remember, you are a man." Marvin's voice was a bit strict. "Understand, brother." Wayne ground his teeth. He stood there like this, looking at Marvin. Everyone was somewhat moved. This pair of brothers situation was very tough. Marvin looked Wayne in the eyes slowly and solemnly said, "Look for a place to sit. You need to rest properly." "I am fine. Relax. I'm here. No one will harm you." I'm here. No one will harm you. I swear by my daggers. This was an oath pledged from the bottom of his heart. With Hanser helping him, Wayne looked for a place to sit. His body was currently very weak, and it would be very easy to fall ill. But he was full of vitality because his older brother had come. Even if the previous Marvin was a bit too kind-hearted, to the point of being timid, in Wayne's eyes, he would forever be that almighty older brother. The two brothers cared for each other. According to the Wizards Alliance's rules, Marvin was merely an acting overlord, nothing more. White River Valley's true overlord ought to be an adult Wayne, because he was a wizard. Even if he was the younger brother, his wizard inheritance made his right of inheritance greater than Marvin's. It's safe to say that the two brothers had a conflict of interest, but they apparently didn't seem to mind this part. They only cared about each other. This was true brotherhood. After the arbiter announced the results of the arbitration, he consciously left. Next would be Ash's Tower Court taking over this event. The audience was full of energy. They originally came here for an arbitration, but they hadn't expected to even be able to see a trial. It might be difficult for this pitiful Baron Marvin to avoid imprisonment. The South Wizard Alliance's rule was very harsh. A trial was different from an arbitration, and Marvin didn't even have the right to defend himself. The outcome would be decided by a judge. The Ash's Tower had 3 judges all year round, but 2 among them had something to do and couldn't come. The one coming today was an old man with a grizzled beard. He was a first-rank wizard with limited aptitudes. He probably didn't have any hope to advance in his lifetime, but with the help of a powerful family or clan, getting a relatively useful position was still good enough. A judge, for example. The judge pretended to read through the summary of the incident. Then, he feigned thinking for a while. Everyone patiently waited for the outcome of the trial. Marvin sneered while looking at that old man, putting on an act. This guy had already decided the result of the trial, hadn't he? An execution is impossible. That's too excessive. I guess it would be imprisonment. But once in prison, with their family strength, killing me wouldn't be hard, right? This old man's acting skills are really bad. The folder is upside down, and his expressions are too exaggerated. Just as he was ridiculing him in his mind, the old man suddenly said in a loud voice, "Cough, cough. I'll now announce the outcome of the trial. Regretfully, because the other 2 judges had something important to do, I'll be the sole judge for this trial." Baron Marvin openly provoked Ash's Tower. This is a serious violation of the Wizards' Protection Rule of the South Wizard Alliance. My verdict, 3 years of imprisonment. When the verdict came out, the audience burst into an uproar. Some nobles fighting for justice roared, 3 years imprisonment? Damn it, he was slandered first. He is innocent and should be released, but you actually imprison him for 3 years. Shameless. That person of the unicorn family is way too shameless, isn't he? There were also a few members of some great wizard families. They mocked and ridiculed this. They weren't sympathizing with Marvin. They just seized the opportunity to speak up and give a blow to a competitor. As for those average nobles, they actually felt sad about this. What if Marvin's situation happened to them one day? If someone slandered you and said you were impersonating a noble, could retaliation be impossible? Marvin was still the owner of the 9th month medal. This couldn't save him? But regardless of how angry everyone was toward this injustice, the verdict had already came out. Marvin would be imprisoned for 3 years. In a corner, Wayne suddenly stood up. Even if he was young, he also knew unicorn's tricks. If Marvin went to prison, he would surely face extreme danger. They definitely wouldn't forgive his brother that easily. Don't be agitated. Hanser dragged Wayne back to his seat. I noticed that Marvin doesn't seem worried at all. He looks awfully calm. Could he still have something? Wayne was stunned. Hanser's words weren't wrong. His older brother really looked very calm. It was as if he didn't care about going to jail. How come? After Marvin heard the verdict, he faintly smiled. As expected, the unicorn family? Vicious and merciless indeed. This is like driving us brothers into a dead end. You're still sitting? He silently looked at the small girl sitting in the witness stand. The latter's expression had already turned awfully calm. It looked like she had no feelings. But Marvin could still feel her anger. I have to say, my luck is really good. If I hadn't met her, I would have truly been fucked, he thought. At this time, the judge said, "The verdict has already been announced. Law enforcers, please lock up Marvin." At this instant, his sentence was interrupted. It was naturally a young voice. "This verdict is invalid." Even though that voice was very gentle, it suddenly echoed in everyone's mind. The judge was stunned. He looked at the young girl sitting on the witness stand and lightly smiled. "Young girl, this is not a decision you can make. As Ashes Tower's master, only a few people knew Hathaway's 3 shapes, and this which hadn't shown her face in public for a very long time. People said she was in seclusion, attacking the legendary threshold. Who would have thought that this small girl was one of the 3 big shots of the 3 ring towers?" The young girl raised her head, coldly watching that old man. "I said this verdict is invalid." This time, her voice rose an octave, turning extremely loud. Everyone looked at her, startled. What happened to this girl? Did she lose her mind? A witness giving order to a judge? Where did this little girl come from? So adorable. It looks like a witness. I guess she is very dissatisfied with this verdict. She is too young, but she seems very sensible. I don't know which family she came from, but I guess she also came to enroll. Everyone was discussing, but there was a small number of people that were stunned. They already began to look at the judge with pity, Marvin included. His expression was still as calm as before, but he had already started crazily laughing in his mind. This idiot actually told the Ashes Tower's master that she couldn't make a decision in her territory. This would surely make Hathaway mad. If Hathaway had originally joined for the fun, just casually participating, now, this half-legend had been completely angered by that unicorn family subordinate. "Don't look for troubles." The old man still hadn't reacted. He then said strictly, "Law enforcers, bring this child away." But no one paid attention to him. The law enforcers had suddenly received a notice from the Ashes Tower's master. They were shocked. It has been a very long time since Dame Hathaway gave them a direct order. This actually made them very shocked. They didn't dare to move. Law enforcers? The old man was furious. Enforcers? The audience was looking at each other in dismay, not clear as to what happened. Marvin almost burst out laughing, but managed to endure. The small girl's body suddenly levitated, both eyes turning crimson. "Unicorn family subordinate, are you a pig?" Just as she finished talking, a thump echoed, and the judge turned into a pig. It blankly walked in circle in the high platform, embarrassed and anxious. Everyone laughed heartily. Instant shapeshift. Marvin squinted, recognizing Hathaway's spell. "You can shut up," the small girl coldly said. "A unicorn subordinate, fucking telling me to know my place. If there's a next time, we'll turn all your people into pigs. This is the 3 ring towers, not your crystal palace." After saying this, her looks suddenly changed, turning into a blonde woman in her 20s. "Dame Hathaway!" Everyone exclaimed in alarm. Ashes Tower's wizards kneeled down one after the other, displaying a humble expression. Hanser was also completely stunned. He pulled Wayne to salute. Only Marvin was left standing in the arbitration hall. "I declare Baron Marvin innocent," Hathaway coldly said. She then opened a door and left the place, leaving everyone in the arbitration hall dismayed. I didn't expect Dame Hathaway to be the witness. In Wayne's room, Hanser was closely watching Marvin. "You must have known something." Marvin stretched, replying, "I only have good luck." Hanser's face showed that he clearly didn't believe that. Marvin changed the topic. "Even if Wayne's body has been recovering very fast, isn't that competition about to start? There is nothing to be done about it. I reckon we can only give up," Hanser said with regret, looking at his own disciple. The competition would start in 3 days. At that time, Wayne would at most be able to use a few magic tricks. First circle spells would be unlikely. He wouldn't let his own disciple throw his life away. Marvin looked at Wayne and said in a resolute tone, "I heard every wizard can bring along 1 follower. In that case, let me use your follower status to compete." The Battle of the Holy Grail came from an ancient story. Feinan was originally surrounded by primal chaos. Great amounts of magic power surrounded various regions of the world, and the chaos magic turned people with low willpower crazy. They would fight each other tooth and nail. This was a chaotic land. Then, the wizard god Lance arrived. He made a holy grail and used it to absorb magic power all over the world. In less than a millennium, Lance absorbed all the parts of Feinan's source of magic, scattered in various regions, and created the universe magic pool with it. He hid the Holy Grail in the depths of the universe magic pool. The one who got the Holy Grail would be able to control Feinan's source of magic and dominate the entire world. A lot of people have been constantly coveting this Holy Grail and try to enter the universe magic pool to look for it, only to come up empty-handed. The Holy Grail ultimately turned into a tail. The symbol of Wizard Supreme Authority, point superscript 1. In the three-ring towers, the Battle of the Holy Grail was the symbol of the cooperation and competition between the three wizard towers. The Battle of the Holy Grail was split into two categories: the best apprentices of the academies and the best second-rank wizards. The winner would be able to get an enchanted item as a reward, an enchanted Holy Grail. The enchanted Holy Grail's uses were endless. It was a very powerful magic item, and also the crystallization of the knowledge of wizard craftsmen. The battle for the Holy Grail would take place every 5 years, so the timing could be considered very good. And Wayne being able to fight his way through to enter the last round of the apprentice selection tournament was not easy. Marvin didn't wish for him to stop there. Moreover, he had been coveting that enchanted Holy Grail for quite a long time. This thing was very useful. Thus, he decided to use Wayne's follower spot to take part in the competition. Everyone was opposed to this decision, but they couldn't do anything about it. Marvin's attitude was unyielding, and he also displayed outstanding strength. As such, Hanser couldn't be uncompromising. The old butler was the most astonished. When he left White River Valley, Marvin was just an ordinary noble. Marvin was now surprisingly able to take part in battle. How much did young Master Marvin change in that time? And Wayne actually seemed exceptionally excited. He had always trusted Marvin. Since his older brother said he would take part in the competition, Brother said he could win. That means he would definitely be able to win. The only concern was using a follower's identity. Won't you feel wronged, brother? Wayne asked. I won't. Marvin shook his head. As long as I can win, I won't bother about these small things. That's good. Wayne, who was still lying down to recover, nodded. You only need a rest now. Listen to Sir Hanser. Tomorrow we will get the notification of the final qualifying round. Let's wait and see, Marvin said. In another room in Magor Academy dorms, why did Dame Hathaway suddenly appear? And she became Marvin's witness? How could there be such a coincidence? Could it be a plot targeting my family? Which clan is responsible? Not likely. No one is able to accurately grasp a legendary wizard's thoughts. Is it really a fluke? Why was walking in his room somewhat impatient? After the end of the trial, every member of the Unicorn family working in the Ashes Tower received a personal warning from Hathaway herself. This was the Ashes Tower. This was Hathaway's domain, not the Unicorn clan headquarters. As for that pitiful judge, he was taken away after having been transformed into a pig. A half-legend wizard's shape-shifting spell. Who knew how long it would last? Never mind this. The important part was that this event made the upper echelon of the clan very dissatisfied about White. His father even sent a letter to scold him. He was only the 13th successor of the Unicorn clan. Although there were numerous heirs, he was relatively outstanding. He reached peak of first-rank wizard at only 13 years old. If nothing unexpected happened, he would advance to a second-rank wizard by the end of next summer. However, he definitely couldn't act on behalf of the Unicorn clan. What he did had definitely harmed the benefits the Unicorn clan received from the three-ring towers. Hathaway's fury was directed at their whole family. This made White very gloomy. How did it suddenly become something like this? Could that little bastard really be his nemesis? Sir, don't be worried, the black-clothed man coldly reassured. As far as I know, even if that Wayne's curse was removed, his body hasn't recovered. He'll definitely be unable to participate in the final round. Sir must quickly prepare for the battle of the Holy Grail. White slowly stopped and nodded. You are right. We need to calm down now. Maybe Dame Hathaway sent people to watch us. Even if the outcome is not as great as I expected, I still got what I wanted. The next day, Hanser brought the notice about the final round of the selection tournament. Forest Zone, for real. Marvin looked at the notification and couldn't help but smile, stunned. Hanser was also at loss. The Battle of the Holy Grail had always been conducted in a snow mountain. Thus, everyone had always prepared for such. But this time, an order apparently came from higher-ups to change it to a forest. From above, Wayne and Hanser both looked at Marvin. Marvin was even more stunned. Who else is above Magor Academy? It's obviously the half-legend Dame Hathaway. It was her idea? Hanser suspiciously looked at Marvin. Mr. Marvin, Wayne is my favorite disciple. I think you don't need to hide too much from me. If you really have something to do with that higher-up, some relationship, everything would make sense. Marvin forced a smile. Hanser didn't randomly say that. Marvin was a ranger. It would be normal in the snow, but in the forest, he would simply be like a fish in water. After their side signed up yesterday, the terrain was immediately changed to a forest. This made it quite difficult for people not to harbor suspicions. Now, a few high-level teachers from Magor Academy were secretly communicating, guessing about Marvin and Hathaway's relationship. They felt that they had underestimated this White River Valley's Baron. This guy was actually close to the Ashes Tower's master. As for the proof, sticking out from Marvin in the arbitration hall, forcefully changing the rule to the greatest extent to help Marvin. Still not enough? Marvin also didn't know what to say. He was really not too familiar with Hathaway. Even though he had heard of her through a few quests, he had only heard a bit about her character. Eccentric, but detesting evil. Like Anthony, she was one of the few wizards who took care of the ordinary people. She wouldn't really change the rules for me, right? What does this mean? He felt a little apprehensive. But in any case, the forest terrain was the best news for the two brothers. In the competition in 2 days, there should be many people watching the match. What? They'll actually participate. White looked at the document in his hands and almost jumped from his chair. Furthermore, it wasn't the previously decided Snow Mountain area, but they'd actually changed it to the forest area. What does this mean in the end? Who could guess the dame's thoughts? Competing is not an issue. Fierceness could be seen on White's face. I heard his older brother would replace his previous follower and participate in the competition. The two brothers will fight together, so I just have to kill them. The black-clothed man said in a low voice. Sir, you still have to be somewhat careful and make sufficient preparations. I have a feeling that this Baron Marvin has some tricks. Only a country bumpkin who can play around with 2 curved daggers. What else could he do? White sneered. This is a world ruled by wizards. Ash's Tower highest floor. A young girl was lazily lying down on a sofa. A parrot flew in and stopped on her snow-white ankle. Everything has been settled? Hathaway quietly asked. The parrot answered. The notice has already been sent. Forest area, and the competition will be the day after tomorrow. I'm not sure why you suddenly asked for this. Was it just because that boy saw through your identity? Hathaway stretched, displaying snow-white skin through her pajamas. She snapped her finger, seemingly bored, turning into a 6-year-old girl. Is that not enough? That youth named Marvin is fun. His younger brother would at most be an outstanding wizard. But Marvin himself might become a legend. It hasn't been lively in a long time. I hope this Marvin would give me a nice surprise. Fighting a wizard and a guardian in a forest would still be very difficult. The final stage of Magor Academy's Battle of the Holy Grail was about to officially start. This time, the competition attracted a lot of people from the neighboring 3 ring towers. After all, it was the period for new student registration, so lots of southern nobles were staying in the surroundings. And stories of Marvin killing in Magor Academy, followed by what happened in the arbitration hall, had already spread throughout the 3 ring tower surroundings. Hearing that Marvin wanted to use the follower spot to participate with his brother, everyone suddenly got interested. White River Valley was an unfamiliar name. A small place in the countryside actually came out with such a pair of brothers. Most people hadn't expected this. For this reason, they were especially curious. Dame Hathaway showing her face also covered Marvin in another layer of mystery. It seemed like this little baron's origin wasn't insignificant. And their opponent, Unicorn Clan's young Master White, didn't meet any problems on his path to the final qualifying round. Most people thought White would end up victorious. After all, in this contest between wizards, just one Marvin would be unable to change anything. And although Marvin's younger brother, the kid known as Wayne, was apparently very talented, he had barely recovered from the curse. His casting ability was close to none. He definitely couldn't use much strength in this match, and might instead even become a liability. Insisting in taking part in the competition in this situation undoubtedly made a lot of people puzzled. However, most people came for entertainment. They wanted to see that Baron Marvin, who had just arrived at the 3 ring towers and then became the center of attention by repeatedly shocking people. They wanted to know what else he could do. Thus, on the day of the match, the audience had completely filled the seats of Ash's Tower's 3rd magic practice field. This is your plan? A 1 versus 2. In the contestant room, Hanser anxiously looked at Marvin after listening to his plan. He didn't worry about Wayne, because according to Marvin's plan, he wouldn't need to appear on stage. Even if he said he would fight as Wayne's follower, he had never once thought of letting his recovering brother get on stage. He would inevitably fight alone this time. He knew he could do it. If it was the normal tournament terrain, Marvin might have a headache. But since it was in the forest, Marvin had great confidence. Level 5 Ranger, with a Ruler of the Night's experience. This should be enough to teach a lesson to 2 first rank class holders, even if one of them had the current strongest class, Wizard. White is a level 5 Wizard. His follower is a level 5 Guardian. You have no way to get near them. Hanser shook his head. Even if it's a complex terrain, White must have made some preparations, and detection-type spells are the counter to your rogue class. I'll wait for an opportunity. Marvin also knew that a Guardian along with a prepared Wizard would be very troublesome. A big shield combined with a big cannon was simply unequaled. But how could they know the result without trying? 10 minutes later, the competition officially started. With a signal from a staff member, Marvin walked on the contestant path, alone. Wayne stayed behind in the contestant's corner. There was some worry in his eyes, but he still fully trusted Marvin. Since his older brother said he was quite confident, he must trust him. His older brother had previously told him that the only thing he could do now was get better more quickly. If Marvin won this round, he had to recover to his peak for the next battle of the Holy Grail. This way, he would be able to fight with those powerhouses from the other 2 academies. After all, the Battle of the Holy Grail's terrain was the Snow Mountain, unlike this forest terrain, which was favorable to Marvin. Marvin walked down the contestant path and went through a sliding door. In front of him was a vast and obscure forest. In front of him was a sheepskin scroll on top of the stone. The rules of the current round were written on the scroll. The rules were simple. Both sides started on opposite ends, north and south. A golden Holy Grail was put in the middle of the forest. It could be found by following the map. To win, you just had to get the Holy Grail and reach a set location. The location was on the western edge of the forest. Both sides had a scroll with a map of the forest. There was a red point on the map, marking the Holy Grail's location. Once someone grabbed the Holy Grail and started moving, they would also be seen on the scroll. Looks like my side is a bit closer. A Guardian's running speed isn't fast. Even with haste, he still wouldn't be as fast as me, and the same applies for the Wizard. They should be aware of this. Thus, they'll probably give up on the Holy Grail and wait at the set location instead, Marvin calmly analyzed. This was a very decent plan. Marvin was a ranger after all, so his speed would be very fast in a forest. But if they waited at the set location, Marvin would find it quite difficult to carry the Holy Grail there while being attacked by 2 people. It needed to be placed in a very small circle. In any case, I'll first get the Holy Grail and think about the rest later. Marvin no longer hesitated and put away the scroll before rushing toward the depths of the forest. I reckon we shouldn't be as fast as him. According to the information, the other side is a level 5 ranger. They might split up, letting the ranger grab the Holy Grail first while that Wayne starts going to the set location. On the other side, White was muttering while looking at the scroll. A tall man was standing behind him, wearing full body armor and holding a very large shield. This was a level 5 Guardian. Not much firepower, but outstanding defense. It was usually said that guardians are rogues' nemesis. An ordinary thief who wanted to break through a guardian's defense was simply a lunatic. Even a ranger with a fierce attack would have a headache. Maybe even Marvin's curved daggers, slashes couldn't break the other side's armor. We are going to the set location, first to wait for them, White firmly ordered. He immediately used haste on the guardian and himself, and the two quickly headed west. A shadow kept moving between trees. Marvin was like a fish in water in the forest. His perception had also risen slightly. Although this kind of increase was very faint and based on the situation, Marvin could still clearly feel himself becoming sharper. In this forest, the two men weren't the only threats. There were still quite a lot of beasts and monsters. However, most of them were at the first rank. Ranger abilities could let him easily avoid all kinds of monsters. On the way, he avoided at least 3 monsters with strength similar to his. He wouldn't be able to do this in the snow mountain. The location of the Holy Grail is ahead. After going around a pine tree, the area in front of him turned out to be a large open space. A stone platform was standing in the middle of the open area. Marvin squinted. He examined the place and found no traps. There doesn't seem to be anything to the north. Seems like they really went straight to the set location to wait for me. Marvin took the Holy Grail and put in his pouch. It was a gold-colored cup, the size of a little bell. He took a look at his surroundings, suddenly displaying a smile on his face. Waiting for an opportunity? Let's see who has more patience. A bold plan suddenly took shape in Marvin's mind. The Holy Grail is on the move, sir. His speed is very fast, but we should be able to get to the set location first, the Guardian reported. Good, we are speeding up, White grimly said. A moment later, the Guardian that was in charge of looking at the map regularly suddenly shouted, "Sir, wait, it stopped moving." What? White was surprised. They had shared the work. He had to regularly use a detection spell. Fortunately, he carried enough uncommon detection items. The Guardian was in charge of checking the map. Look, the Guardian pointed at the map. It suddenly stopped moving. And based on the map, he seems to be not too far from us. White was confused. He felt a hint of a scheme. But the other side shouldn't know his location. Being this close, this was an opportunity. He might be resting. Regardless, we should go and see, White firmly said. The two cautiously walked toward the Holy Grail's location. They stayed focused and kept a pace that was neither too fast nor too slow. They weren't idiots. This might be Marvin's trap, all calculated. They arrived in front of a bush without meeting any dangers on the way. This kind of situation made them feel that something was wrong. According to the map, that Holy Grail should be hidden in front of us. The Guardian took a look at the map before closing it and firmly holding his shield. Hiding in the bush, White sneered. He naturally knew of the signature ranger skill, hide, but he still needed to use detection to make sure. He didn't move and used a magic ring. Detect life. The next instant, an extremely small red dot appeared in his sight. This meant that there was one living creature in the bush that could threaten them. It should be that level 5 ranger. He shouldn't have guessed that we were in the surroundings. A rest is indeed required after such a long run. This is such a great opportunity to kill him first, and then we can kill his brother. White showed a hint of a cruel smile. He then took out a magic staff and began chanting. First circle spell, Hand of the Fire God. Thick smoke spread out as the raging fire ignited the bush, spreading quickly. A fire spell indeed. White coldly watched the bush. That kind of conflagration is enough to force him out, right? The killing would then follow. He knew that there were a lot of people watching the match through special magic screens. His method might be a bit cruel, but he didn't care. He had been holding back his anger these past few days. He must kill these brothers to vent. But he soon felt that something was wrong. Why was there no reaction after the bush caught on fire? There's an issue. White reacted extremely quickly, suddenly taking a step back. The Guardian's timing was extremely on point. He directly rushed forward. At this time, the earth slightly trembled, and a sharp shriek could be heard from a bush. Fuck! White cursed. A huge head could be seen rushing out of the fire, its long tongue lashing about. The audience was in absolute silence. In fact, They had started scolding him in their hearts when Marvin started his plan. This bear Marvin was very vicious, wasn't he? He had actually tied the Holy Grail to a rabbit and then thrown that pitiful rabbit to a huge monster. Specifically, a very large boa resting in a bush by the waterside. When he found it, his brain immediately thought of this plan. Waiting for an opportunity? Impossible. White had overlooked this, or maybe this was because he didn't have any better choice. They were slower after all. As long as the Holy Grail was in Marvin's hand, he had the initiative. Marvin fully making use of this initiative was the same as waiting for an opportunity. After the boa had woken and swallowed the rabbit, he lazily laid down in the bush. This beast looked a bit sleepy, and when White and his man rushed, Marvin had already hidden himself. Whether it's Detect Life or another detection spell, they would all detect on the same plane at the same height as the caster. However, second-rank spells could do a spatial scan. Unfortunately for him, he hadn't ranked up yet. Marvin calmly watched from above. He was now hiding on the highest branch of a big tree, with the help of his hide skill. White hadn't noticed that Marvin had in fact hidden himself above his own head. This was the second mistake. This mistake was especially deadly. He might not have any more time to pay attention to this because of the large forest boa rushing toward them. The large forest boa was very fast. It weighed at least 5 tons. Thus, even if it was only a first-rank monster, with its build and its speed, the impact wouldn't be something an ordinary class holder would be able to take on. But a guardian could. "We kill it," White bellowed. He knew he had fallen into a trap, but there was nothing he could do about it. They had already angered this large forest boa by putting his resting place on fire. It was definitely angry, and probably nearly crazy with fury. He also didn't know how Marvin hid the Holy Grail in the large forest boa's belly. He was sure Marvin was in the vicinity, waiting for a chance to attack. But they had no other way. They had to take care of the large forest boa first. "I'll block it," the guardian firmly said. He then erected his shield and shouted. Iron Bastion Superscript 1. First-rank Guardian's most powerful skill. His whole body seemed to turn into a fort, and a weird light emerged on his shield. Bang! The large forest boa's head ruthlessly knocked into the Guardian's shield. The shield was slightly bent. Good shield, Marvin thought, surprised. Worthy of someone from the Unicorn clan, truly wealthy. This shield quality was actually very good. If it was an adventurer's, it would have broken down from the boa's charge. Despite this, it was still hard to take for the Guardian. He stumbled back 2 steps, the arm holding the shield apparently going limp. A fracture. Marvin noticed the weak point. It's about time. SSSS. After being blocked by the Guardian's Iron Bastion, the forest boa was also a little stunned. It flicked its tongue, about to launch its second attack. But at this time, a very accurate ray of frost ruthlessly pierced the boa's forked tongue. Tiny holes appeared on the large boa's tongue. But that wasn't all. Its tongue began freezing before it was finally covered in a layer of frost. It painfully moved in circle, apparently losing its sense of direction. The Guardian let out a sigh of relief while White was coldly looking at that large forest boa. He was the 13th heir of the Unicorn clan. He wasn't a fool. As long as it was still of the first rank, a snake's tongue was the most important organ as it was used to perceive the surroundings. It would lock onto an enemy by sensing the changes in temperature and odor. Only upon reaching second rank would infrared vision or spiritual awareness skills be gained. A powerful large boa at first rank would completely lose its sense of direction once its tongue was frozen. The audience couldn't help but have a whole new level of respect for White when they saw this scene. This boy was very smart. His ability to adapt to the unexpected was very worthy of praise. But they then instantly began to worry about this Unicorn clan's heir, because that vicious Marvin was about to make his move. White's critical hit made the large forest boa lose its sense of direction. At that instant, the Guardian let out a sigh of relief. But in that split second, Marvin made his move. He directly jumped from the top of the tree. The audience was startled. Jumping from this height, even if he didn't die, he would still surely break his legs. Only those with excellent eyesight noticed the rope tied to Marvin's body. Wishful rope. Marvin's body fell at great speed, without making a sound. He fell in an instant, dropping behind the Guardian. His jump was extremely accurate. White's eyes widened, caught unprepared. He hadn't expected Marvin to appear like this. When he noticed Marvin, it was already too late. The Guardian only had one weak point, and it was the back of the neck. He had unknowingly exposed the back of his neck earlier when he was withstanding the large forest boa's attack. Once the effects of the Iron Bastion wore off, he became somewhat weak. This was a big flaw. Marvin instantly made a decision when he noticed that, and then made his move. This required the ability to grasp the opportunity and decisively act. Feinan unsheathed. A cold ray of light. Slash. This slash directly cut the back of the Guardian's neck. Die! White shouted. He aimed his magic staff at Marvin. However, not waiting for Marvin to land, the wishful rope suddenly began to shrink. As he chanted the incantation, he was brought back to the top of the tree in an instant. The top of the tree was out of range of magic spells. White angrily stomped his feet, eyes wide from anger. The Guardian collapsed. He was wearing a stunned expression under his helmet. He didn't even know how he died. Up till now, Marvin had only used his daggers once. The audience was speechless. This move was too exquisite. It didn't look like a move a 14-year-old could make. It would be too far-fetched to call it a lucky strike. The Guardian died. Only White was left. After Marvin returned to the top of the tree, he untied the rope and made some nimble jumps between trees, hidden from White's view. The large forest boa was still moving in circles. The fight was not over. White calmed down. The fight really wasn't over. White was still alive, and the Holy Grail was still inside the stomach of that large forest boa. Marvin couldn't leave. He had planned on getting rid of both White and his Guardian earlier. But White's abilities exceeded Marvin's predictions. Not all wizards were wastes that only knew how to study spells. Obviously, White was able to reach the level of having real aptitude. He displayed very impressive abilities in front of the large forest boa. If not for that accurate ray of frost, he might have already died. Indeed, Marvin originally wanted to kill the wizard while they were fighting the boa, making it easier to kill the Guardian. But the large forest boa lost its sense of direction after getting hit, forcing Marvin to find another way. So he just killed one first and went on from there. It was now a 1 versus 1. Marvin hid in the shadow of a pine tree, coldly watching White through a small hole between the leaves. The other side had retreated a bit, but hadn't left. He was still thinking about the Holy Grail in the large forest boa's stomach. As long as he got a hold of the Holy Grail, Marvin would have no hope of winning. "You want to lure me by playing mind games?" Marvin thought. White was also cunning. He didn't feel disheartened or angry due to the Guardian's death. He had quickly calmed down. He watched the crazy forest boa, ready to mortally wound it at any time. Even if the large forest boa was fierce, it was a monster, nothing more. White had many ways to take care of it. The reason he hadn't done anything yet was because he was still afraid of Marvin mounting a sneak attack at any time. This was a psychological battle. White's detection spells were almost all used up, and he didn't dare to gamble. What if Marvin was hiding on top of a tree again? That was just wasting magic power. This damned forest zone. White scolded inwardly. The advantage of a ranger in a forest area was too great, especially for someone with experience like Marvin. He could come and go like the wind, while wizards and guardians couldn't. 10 minutes later, the large forest boa stopped running amok. Its tongue broke free from the frost. It helplessly laid down on the ground, slowly squirming. Marvin squinted. About to attack? Sure enough, White no longer hesitated. He quickly dashed forward and stopped in the relatively spacious zone. In this zone, even if Marvin wanted a sneak attack, White would quickly notice him. His magic staff aimed at that large forest boa. He began to chant a spell in a loud voice. His magic staff was different. The tip was twisted and ended in a unicorn's family emblem. Not a first circle spell. Marvin shivered. A first circle spell didn't have such a long casting time. It was that magic staff. It was a spell attached to the magic staff. Worthy of an influential clan. Rich and overbearing indeed. Marvin thought. White's spell wasn't something he was capable of himself. It was actually activating a spell attached to his magic staff. This way of chanting looked like the paladin, guardian knight, activating the enchanted divine spells on his sword. White didn't need second rank strength to use the second circle spell. Soon, a blood-like scarlet ray shot from the tip of White's magic staff. It completely covered the large forest boa. Second circle spell, flesh removal. This was a very cruel spell. It could forcefully remove the flesh of an animal. Even a sturdy monster hit by this spell would still die painfully. The large forest boa was but a mere first-rank monster. It was unable to resist this kind of frightening spell. Soon, under the scarlet mist, the large forest boa's flesh began to fall in pieces. It was as if it had rotten, displaying its thin skeleton. The large forest boa struggled for a bit where it lay before finally dying. White coldly looked at the scene. At that moment, a golden light flashed in front of him. It was something similar to a little bell hanging from the large forest boa's corpse. The Holy Grail. White's eyes shone. He didn't move, however. He knew Marvin was definitely hiding in the surroundings. Seeing the Holy Grail, the other side would definitely be unable to hold back. As long as Marvin showed himself, White's spell would immediately take care of him. Once his spell hit, everything would be over. Wizards are this world's most powerful class. A ranger is but a waste class. White coldly observed the surroundings for any change. He didn't feel a bit of worry. The Holy Grail was before his eyes, and he was patient. What's more, he knew that flesh removal was a spell that sent a powerful energy. That energy didn't scatter after killing the large forest boa. 5 minutes were needed before they could safely approach the large forest boa's corpse. Otherwise, the remaining magic power could tear off their flesh. White would be very willing to watch Marvin try to steal that Holy Grail in those 5 minutes. If this happened, he would suffer a very miserable death. Focus. The forest area is the best area for rangers. I must win. White took a long breath, his eyes darting everywhere. But suddenly, a shadow flashed in front of him. Marvin had appeared. Marvin indeed made his move. The wishful rope was still tied to his waist, pulling him by shrinking at an incredible speed, making Marvin fly through the open space from the east toward the west. In the middle of the open space was the corpse of the large forest boa. White sneered and aimed at Marvin with his magic staff. However, he was immediately stunned. Hold on, this is weird. He's too far. Marvin was a bit too high. White's spells were almost unable to target him. What's going on? Could he only have wanted to show his face and didn't plan to take the Holy Grail? White was a bit confused. Based on Marvin's current elevation and flying height, he would be unable to reach the Holy Grail. He could only fly past the body of a large forest boa. He could only reach it if his arm was at least 2 to 3 meters long. What is this guy thinking? Why was it a loss? As Marvin's body quickly streaked across the sky, it soon reached its lowest height. This was exactly at the location of the forest boa corpse. There were still dangerous red lights fluttering on it. It was the remaining magic power. Marvin laughed and suddenly extended his right hand, quickly chanting a strange-sounding incantation. Vine Metamorphosis. This was the spell he earned from Mad Lich Fidel. It finally came in handy. Marvin's hand instantly turned into a slender vine and crazily grew. In the blink of an eye, it exceeded 4 meters. The vine passed through the red magic power and could easily reach the Holy Grail. The vine grew and coiled around the Holy Grail before quickly withdrawing. Whoosh! Whoosh! Marvin's shadow was quickly dragged to the other side by the wishful rope. Furthermore, it was in the direction of the set location. Plop! Marvin nimbly landed on a thick and solid branch. His hand immediately returned to its original state, the Holy Grail safely held within. Marvin lifted the Holy Grail and turned toward White, a grin on his face. My apologies. I need to leave first. The next instant, he suddenly disappeared in the forest. Fuck! White instantly got angry. He didn't expect Marvin to possess Vine Metamorphosis, this rarely seen spell. Wasn't this a spell of the Northern Druids? Vines are plants. They aren't affected by the flesh removal spell. Thus, Marvin was able to easily take away the Holy Grail. White's face was ashen, but his reaction was very fast. He immediately cast a haste on himself and rushed after Marvin, extremely mad. Even though he might not catch up, he still had to try. How can I let that little bastard beat me? He shouted inwardly, to the extent that his originally delicate face became twisted. He rushed through the woods, Marvin's silhouette apparently flickering in the distance. He clenched his teeth and madly sprinted. Suddenly, he noticed a silvery light from the corner of his eyes. Hold on. Unable to react, his neck was about to hit something. That was a silver thread coiled between two trees. Due to his speed, White directly crashed into it. The silver thread directly hit White's neck. This resulted in a frightening, cutting strength. Fortunately, he always kept a barrier spell activated, or else he would have lost his head. Because of the barrier, only a bloody line appeared on his neck. White's face was ashen. He felt the threat of death for the first time. But suddenly, a shadow dropped down without a sound and landed behind him. Do you really think I would let someone that went after my younger brother's life easily leave like that? Marvin whispered. His dagger already turned bloody. The audience was absolutely silent. They weren't silent because of the end of the competition, but because Marvin really killed White. A barrier's strength was finite in the end. It had already become fragile after hitting the silver thread. Marvin cut off White's head in front of such a large audience. After a while, the audience burst into an uproar. Is this guy really unafraid of a Unicorn Clan's retaliation? That person's killing nature is so dominating, so frightening. White River Valley is only a small territory in the border. How can it be compared to the Unicorn Clan? Even if he was only one among many heirs, the Unicorn Clan would definitely not let it go. This youth is really too impulsive, isn't he? The 9th month medal will be unable to save him. Their expressions were very grave. The Unicorn Clan was among the top 5 wizard clans on the East Coast. They had 2 third-rank wizards and a multitude of second-rank wizards. Their headquarters was at Crystal Island on the edge of the Sword Sea. Even if it was a little far from the south, if they wanted to send troops, it would be enough to eliminate a small place like White River Valley. They would have to go through Jewel Bay and then through Rivershore City. The way they saw it, Marvin's way of handling things wasn't smart. He definitely could have knocked out White and then won the competition. If they won the competition, White would have only bore grudges against Marvin, nothing more. White's death would incite the Unicorn's clan anger. With White's death, the competition was already over. Because it was a competition and not a life or death duel, Marvin didn't have the right to loot White's body. This was the only thing Marvin felt pity about. This guy had a lot of good things on him. When he left the competition area, Wayne walked over and excitedly gave Marvin a strong hug. Hanser's face was ashen. Why'd you kill him? He asked. I won't say the reason a second time. Marvin smiled. I made inquiries these past few days. White is one of the members of the Blue Morphine. Isn't that true? Hanser sighed, but doing this would put you in a very dangerous spot. The Unicorn Clan is a behemoth. A behemoth? Marvin smiled. He didn't think so. Crystal Island on the edge of the Sword Sea was close to Jewel Bay, and it was even closer to that volcanic island. In at most half a month, that ancient red dragon would be awoken by an earthquake. He would wreak havoc through the entire East Coast. Without Anthony, the East Coast had no legend to contend against it. And the Unicorn Clan's Crystal Palace would be the first target of its plunder due to its close proximity. Marvin remembered this clearly. The Unicorn Clan, this once glorious wizard clan, was almost completely destroyed before the biggest disaster even arrived, due to the ancient red dragon tearing apart everything. Only a pitiful few clansmen who were wandering outside survived and started rebuilding their clan. Obviously, that ancient red dragon didn't have a good time either. It was said that the Unicorn Clan had used everything they had and forced the red dragon to withdraw. Thus, that dragon was silent for more than half a year, and only after the calamity did he resume wreaking havoc. After White's death, the clan might, of course, send a small part of their strength to deal with White River Valley. but it was more probable that an assassin might try to hunt down Marvin. After all, due to the location, sending a part of their army to the distant White River Valley was truly not worth it. As for Wayne, as long as he stayed in the Three Ring Towers territory, he would be very safe. If they dispatch a hitman, I'll actually look forward to it. Marvin was waiting for it, because he would rank up soon. Just as they were ready to leave, a wizard wearing a purple cheapao gown, superscript 1, suddenly appeared in front of them. 1. Clothes of someone in an official position. Baron Marvin, a higher-up wants to meet you. Hanser's expression had a slight change. He was a member of the Ashes Tower, so he obviously understood the meaning of the purple-clothed wizard. A purple cheapao gown, this was something that only members of the top wizard regiment could wear. Their actions represented the Ashes Tower's master, Hathaway's decisions. Naturally, that higher-up he mentioned was most likely Hathaway. Hanser looked at Marvin, his expression suddenly changing into a, "I knew it. You had a relation with Dame Hathaway, look." "Understood." Marvin calmly said, "Go on ahead. I'll follow you to see that higher-up." The top floor of the Ashes Tower. Clean brown wooden floor, wine-red sofa, milky white curtains. The three colors formed a strong visual attack. A green parrot was calmly standing there. A lazy woman was lying down on the sofa. She was blonde, wearing thin pajamas covering her body. Her fair white thighs were exposed, dazzling Marvin's eyes. White River Valley's Marvin pays respect to Dame Countess. Marvin focused and greeted with a noble etiquette. In the South Wizard Alliance's system, Ashes Tower's master, Hathaway, had the title of Countess. And if she reached legend rank, she would establish her own territory far in the wilderness and immediately become a marquess. As for a dukedom, there was no dukedom in the whole East Coast. This was related with the fact that Feinan Continent was vast and had a crazy amount of monsters between cities. The formation of many powerful forces wasn't an empire, it was an alliance. You don't have to be too polite, Baron Marvin. You and I both know that titles are absurd things, and that only strength matters. Hathaway said in a low voice, her two pretty eyes suddenly paying attention to Marvin. "You recognized me that day?" Marvin was silent for an instant, and then said, "I have a rather peculiar perception skill." "Lies," Hathaway sneered. "Your perception is very average. In this regard, you aren't particularly gifted." "Well," Marvin shrugged, "not too long ago, I had a very long dream. There were many people in the dream and a lot of things. Forgive my boldness. I met many outstanding people in my dream. You were among them." "Dream?" Hathaway was suddenly full of energy. "What kind of dream?" "This is very difficult to describe, but it thoroughly changed me." Marvin tried to stay as vague as possible. He couldn't say that he transmigrated, could he? "I understand." Hathaway didn't question, displaying an understanding expression instead. "You really are a seer." Seer?" Marvin's expression didn't change, but he was startled inwardly. He had expected Hathaway to wait for him to explain, but unexpectedly, she instead justified it for him. He immediately took the opportunity to ask, "Seer? What does this mean?" Hathaway stopped and deeply looked at Marvin. "Some people can see different things. Some people are blessed by fate and become able to see the terrible events that have yet to happen. Seer, as have many different ways of looking in the future. Dreaming is one of them. I'm also a seer, thus I looked for you today." Marvin frowned. "Could you let me know what you saw?" Hathaway didn't hide it. Instead, she stared at Marvin. "I saw the destruction." "Destruction?" Marvin's smile was a little stiff. The east was covered in flames. Monsters were rampaging. Cities were ruined from tides of monsters. The era of the wizard rule ended. Some lofty figures entered Feinan. They were uncontested. I also saw too many deaths, including my own. There was a shadow approaching me, and I couldn't do anything against its strength. A cold gust of wind blew. The top floor of the Ashes Tower had suddenly turned ice cold. Hearing Hathaway's story, Marvin was somewhat stunned. In the end, did he truly transmigrate, or was Earth just a dream? Could he remember those things because he was also a seer? Was that previous life just an illusion? Wrong. Seers and such have no relation with me. I am Marvin, Marvin from Earth. He suddenly shook his head, startled into a cold sweat. Hathaway's words had almost made his soul waver. He wiped his sweat and focused. In a hoarse voice he asked, "Why telling me this?" Hathaway stood up from the sofa. She was a bit taller than Marvin, who hadn't fully grown yet. She lightly pulled Marvin's hand and pulled him to a table. "The way I foresee the future is through this crystal ball. I've been looking at my future since a long time ago, but every time I look at my fate, I would sink in more despair. Because I've always been unable to get rid of this shadow. I was fated to die. But a few days earlier, after you showed up in the three-ring towers, I took another look. But this time, I saw a different outcome." Hathaway softly lifted the white cloth on the crystal ball. A few chaotic scenes were flickering inside the crystal ball. The last scene stopped on the image of a man. That man had twin daggers on his belt and was holding a scroll in his hand. A shadow was lying in front of him. "This is—" Marvin's mouth suddenly dried up. "You killed him." Hathaway pointed at that shadow and said, "Not long ago, this man killed Anthony. But in the fate I saw, you kill him. This is the reason I was looking for you." Marvin was silent. What did that shadow mean? He was clear about it. The Shadow Prince. A very active god during the Great Calamity. His avatars were all over Feinan. He once assassinated 3 legends at the same time. This was a very jealous and petty god. The people revering him were a part of the assassins and a few shadow wizards. But if a legend appeared within those 2 classes, he would strangle his own follower without the slightest hesitation. His famous quote was, "Just one assassin is enough in this world." Marvin knew him. He was a complete coward. He liked to hide in the shadows. However, he was very powerful. If Marvin wanted to advance to ruler of the night, the Shadow Prince wouldn't let him off. In fact, Marvin fought against him an incalculable number of times in the game. Marvin died 3 times, and the Shadow Prince died once. But because Marvin was a player, he had the Golden Generation identity. He could keep reviving. The Shadow Prince only had 1 life, so Marvin still had the final win. The final result was the fall of the Shadow Prince, and Marvin successfully reaching godhood. But this was obviously in his previous life. The scene shown on the crystal ball was when Marvin killed the Shadow Prince and looted the Book of Nalu from his body. He had no idea why Hathaway could see this scene. This was really too puzzling. "You want me to kill him?" Marvin said with a little bit of difficulty. The current Marvin was definitely an ant to the Shadow Prince. He could crush Marvin between his fingers at any time. "Do you think you can?" Hathaway immediately sneered. All of Feinan's legends are looking for this guy, but they still couldn't catch him. "You, a ranger that hasn't even gotten his 2nd rank class, being able to kill him? Then, why did you show me this?" Marvin asked in a deep voice. "I need you to get this." Hathaway pointed at that scroll Marvin was holding in the crystal ball. The Book of Nalu, also known as Book of Deception. It was a magic book written by the god of deception Nalu in the last moments before his fall. Each person could understand a few things from it, good or bad. It totally relied on the person's luck. This thing was a god artifact. I don't know this book's current location, but it's clearly not in the Shadow Prince's hands. Hathaway's eyes were shining. "From what I've seen, you seem to have a special connection to this book. You should be able to find this book. Can you?" Marvin hesitated for a moment and then nodded. "But only 1 page. My dream showed me the location of a page of the Book of Nalu buried not far from here." Marvin chose to acknowledge that seer identity. Since Hathaway thought they were alike, there was no harm in carefully using this. He truly knew where the 6th page of the Book of Nalu was. It would certainly be quite advantageous if he could hand it to a future legend. "I'll give you 3 months, Hathaway firmly said. "I have to reach legendary rank before that event happens. The Book of Nalu would help me accomplish that, even if it's only 1 page. Now, tell me what you want in exchange." The witch let go of the crystal ball and stared at Marvin. "I hope you won't be stupid and ask anything exaggerated." When Marvin left the top floor of the Ashes Tower, it was already the middle of the night. The two had discussed for quite a while. Because they shared the seer identity, Hathaway seemed to treat Marvin as an equal. This was quite uncommon. Unfortunately, Marvin knew he wasn't a seer. What he saw wasn't like Hathaway's vague vision of the future. It was the true future. The two chatted for a while. According to what Hathaway knew, the number of seers in Feinan Continent wouldn't exceed 10. Every seer had the potential of being a legend. She wasn't too clear about the origin of the seers, but it surely had something to do with the disappearance of the wizard god. Marvin promised to look for the Book of Nalu for Hathaway. His requirements were very simple: protect his younger brother Wayne, and form an alliance between the Ashes Tower and White River Valley. Hathaway was straightforward and promised. She obviously knew the matter with the Unicorn clan. Ashes Tower's strength was too powerful. They were unafraid of the Unicorn clan. Shielding White River Valley was something very easy to do. The news of the alliance would be announced tomorrow morning and would then spread to all of East Coast. Thus, people who wanted to put their hands on White River Valley would think twice before acting. Not everyone could take on an angry half-legend witch. For Marvin, accidentally meeting Hathaway made everything much smoother. He originally still needed to handle the Unicorn clan, but now the pressure would disappear. He hurried back to Wayne's bedroom and saw that the small guy had already been sleeping. After explaining a few things to the old butler, Marvin left Magor Academy right away. The true battle of the Holy Grail would start 2 weeks later. Wayne should have recovered by then. Marvin would proceed with his previous plan in the meantime. He hadn't forgotten the eternal flower promise to the Mad Lich, and now he also had to get the Book of Nalu for Hathaway. These things were both hidden very well, but fortunately, Marvin's memory was exceptional, and he had a deep affinity with treasures, or this would have been a real headache. Of course, the most important part was still ranking up. Turning into a night walker was the most important part of Marvin's plan. If he couldn't advance, even if Wayne and Marvin worked together, they might not be able to win the enchanted Holy Grail. To turn into a night walker, he needed to find a member of the Night Walker organization. Marvin rented a horse in Magor Academy and rode toward the north in the night. To the northwest of the three-ring towers was a large, dense forest spreading for 1,000 kilometers, the Thousand Leaves Forest. It was also the territory of the Wood Elves. Marvin knew the location of a night walker. He lived in seclusion in the surroundings of the Thousand Leaves Forest. That guy was apparently no good, but if he could get his recommendation, his advancement would be as good as done. Oaktown, as the human town situated the furthest north of the three-ring towers. Oaktown had always been the paradise of adventurers and merchants. All kinds of trade went there, including slave trade. Of course, no elven slaves were included in this place. As this was a mountainous area adjoining the Wood Elves' kingdom, even greedy merchants didn't dare to anger the Elven King. Especially since in the last 100 years, the new Elven King had shown his ability and an unyielding attitude. The High Elves' glory was already being forgotten, and all High Elves were already in the Eternal Nation. Only the Wood Elves and some other ordinary elves were left behind. The Wood Elves were the most united among them. They gathered in the Thousand Leaves Forest, listening to the Elven King's orders, and had knowledge and treasures from the Second Era. Although mankind had already been drooling over the resources in the Thousand Leaves Forest, the formidable Elven King, with the help of the Elven Iron Guard, had locked human wizards, slavers, and businessmen out. In the past 100 years, very few elven slaves had appeared in the South, because if an elf went missing, that powerful legend Elven King would set out and ruthlessly slaughter a whole human village. This guy was a star killer among elves. He simply didn't conform to the elven temperament. Even if the Elder Assembly was dissatisfied with this new Elven King, they also had to admit that under the lead of this king, the Wood Elves were once again rising up, regaining part of the glory they had during the Second Era. At least, the South Wizard Alliance prohibited elven slavery and took the initiative to be friendly with the Wood Elves' kingdom. Oaktown's existence was a symbol of a friendly cooperation between both sides. Both sides were there to engage in trade, abiding with the old social order. Harsh but fair. But this didn't stop humans from going north. The Elven King didn't allow any human to enter the Thousand Leaves Forest. Once caught, one would immediately be imprisoned. Elves usually didn't kill, but their dungeons were quite durable. Even though it was like that, the Thousand Leaves Forest was too vast and there were too few elven iron guards. There were still many adventurers secretly entering the Thousand Leaves forest to gather some good things. As long as luck was with them, they would be able to earn quite a bit. Even if they met an elven iron guard, as long as they didn't anger him, said a few friendly words, and gave up everything they got in the Thousand Leaves forest, they might be able to escape unscathed. Thus, Oaktown was always a good place for low-level adventurers to gamble. When Marvin arrived at Oaktown from the Three-Ring Towers, it was already morning. He led the horse into town. If I'm not wrong, that guy lives in seclusion in Oaktown. The exact location is... Forget it, paying a visit at night is more fitting. I hurried through the middle of the night. I'm beat. 9 Constitution is really too bad. Marvin approached an inn's door while yawning. He paid and went asleep. He woke up in a daze at nightfall. After he ate his fill, he pulled himself together and left the inn, strolling down the street. Oaktown was very lively in the evening, with people were hurriedly moving about, and all kinds of fine food emitting attractive smells. And on the side of the street, many women were throwing themselves toward those seemingly rich and wealthy adventurers trying to be picked. They may have come back from the Thousand Leaves forest and could be generous. If they served them well, their tip could be many times the ordinary amount. Some thought that they didn't work, but in fact, prostitutes couldn't lose any clients. Marvin walked on the street, experiencing a rather familiar feeling. He had come multiple times to Oaktown, but this familiar feeling wasn't from coming back to this town. Rather, it was the feeling of someone walking alone in an unfamiliar small town. Marvin was a loner in his previous life. He had very few friends, yet all of them were experts. The current Marvin was even more of a loner. He could only rely on himself now. Marvin ignored a few prostitutes grabbing his hand to push it against their chests and swatted away the hand of a thief that tried to steal his purse. He went through most of Oaktown and arrived at the east edge of the town. There was a blacksmith shop there. The old blacksmith had a beautiful girl who was very skilled. She had opened a tailor shop next door. The father and daughter were very well liked by the people from Oaktown. The former crafted weapons they could use to withstand monsters' attacks. As for the latter, who didn't like beautiful young girls. Marvin stood outside the blacksmith shop for a moment and noticed that no one was inside. He hesitated and then decided to enter the tailor shop next door. In the tailor shop, the girl was measuring a female adventurer's build. Noticing Marvin coming in, she greeted him and hinted for him to wait for a bit. Marvin casually found a place to sit down. After a short time, the tailor finished her measurements and the adventurer gave her an advance payment. They made an appointment to pay for the goods 3 days later, making the exchange at that time. Marvin had experienced this kind of event in the past. In the game, he had also climbed from the bottom step by step, but this time, his identity was actually that of a noble. This was quite hard to adapt to. Still, this kind of atmosphere made him feel especially comfortable. "Do you want to buy some clothes, or have something custom-made?" the girl said while smiling. Her smile revealed 2 small and very lovely dimples. She had brown hair and gave the feeling of the girl next door. "I am Jane. How may I help you?" Marvin got right to the point. "Hello, Miss Jane. I came to look for your father." "My father?" Jane was somewhat surprised. "Are you his friend?" "We still haven't met, but I've heard of him." Marvin smiled. "He could be in the tavern? He might return in the evening. Business is slow these days. Very few people are looking for him to craft anything. Thus he frequently hangs around in the tavern," Jane explained. "In a tavern?" Marvin thought before suddenly saying, "If you don't mind, can I wait for him here?" "Ah." Jane carefully checked Marvin, showing a hint of vigilance. Could this man want to try anything on me? This was not the first time something like that happened, after all. But even if he wanted to, the one who would suffer in the end would be himself. After thinking of this, she gently smiled. Of course. Not waiting for Marvin to thank her, a shadow suddenly rushed from behind a shop counter. Marvin was suddenly startled and moved back. It looked like a pitch-black evil dog. Wait, not an evil dog. Fuck, this is a hellhound. Even if it's still small, it still has the strength of the peak of first rank. Whoosh! Marvin unsheathed his twin daggers, staring at that hellhound on guard. Even if it was young, that guy could rip apart the head of a tiger. In his previous life, Marvin had only heard a few pieces of information about this Nightwalker. He hadn't expected that this seemingly kind-hearted girl actually raised a hellhound. He suddenly understood. Damn it, that girl mistook me for a pervert. Marvin didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. Ah, Missa doesn't need to be nervous. Walking from behind the counter, she gently petted the hellhound's head, displaying a crafty smile. Lil Black is very obedient. Without my permission, he won't injure anyone. Looking at the hellhound's vicious expression, Marvin shrugged. The obvious meaning was, as long as she said a word, the hellhound would tear him into pieces. Apparently flirting with this girl in Oaktown wasn't easy. Good looks had probably brought her a lot of troubles. No offense, but I truly came to look for your father. Since I'm not welcome here, I'll go wait in the blacksmith shop next door. Marvin put away his curved daggers and departed. Jane was looked at the back of the leaving Marvin, stunned. Was he really looking for my father? Strange person. Why are you looking for an old drunkard? Don't you agree? She petted the hellhound's head, talking to herself. The interior of the blacksmith shop was a mess, and there was dust everywhere. The girl's words weren't wrong. There was really no business. No one needed weapons, so the old blacksmith naturally had no work. Marvin casually sat in a corner and began to silently wait. Time passed quickly, and the sky gradually darkened. Soon, the inside of the blacksmith shop turned pitch black. Marvin was still waiting. Jane came over once and told him that the old blacksmith might spend the night in the tavern, telling Marvin that it would be better for him to come back tomorrow. But Marvin thanked her and stayed there to wait. A night walker would only show his true nature during the night. In the darkness, faint footsteps could be heard. Marvin quietly used hide. The footsteps of a staggering old man could be heard coming from a faint source of light. He carried an oil lamp as he returned to his house. He came through the door and hung the oil lamp to the side. He then locked the door of the blacksmith shop. Marvin stopped breathing, his heartbeat somewhat speeding up. This advancement was the most important and the most challenging part, and it would happen this night. The old man's body reeked of alcohol. He looked drunk and was stumbling his way to the weapon stand, conveniently grabbing an iron sword. His movements seemed very slow. Wrong. Under the faint lighting, Marvin immediately noticed that old man's shoulder fiercely tremble. This was sign of using strength. Without thinking, he did a very awkward roll, escaping from his original location. Clang! The old man's speed was quick like the wind. A sword had slashed at Marvin's original location. He didn't look drunk at all. Even though the room had a very faint lighting, he still stared at Marvin. Marvin gulped, silently looking at the place he had been standing at. There was a deep mark on the ground. This was the most ordinary iron sword, yet it actually had this much power in the hand of that old man. He had definitely held back. If he went all out, Marvin couldn't even imagine. Not bad. You found the flaw I showed on purpose, the old man said with a blank face. But this isn't enough. Why are you looking for me? Advancement. Marvin got right to the point. Few people know my identity. Who told you? The old man discarded his weapon and immediately lied down on a wooden bed in a corner of the house. Hearsay. Marvin had already prepared his lines beforehand, but it was a bit unreliable. Hearsay. The old man sneered. If you can find me through rumors, then how could those guys that want me dead not show up at my door every day? Marvin shrugged. I simply want to become an even more outstanding ranger. There are too many ranger advanced classes. The Thousand Leaves Forest is close. Maybe you could try some of the ancient elven advanced classes. The old man was indifferent. The other classes will decline. Marvin slowly took out 2 daggers and seriously said, You know that night is coming. Night is coming. The Night Walker's maxim. The old man suddenly stood up from his bed and firmly watched Marvin. Who are you? I saw a bit of what's coming. Marvin calmly continued. Hathaway is the same. Those old prophecies are about to happen. Hathaway. As expected, the old man was somewhat relieved. Another seer. This world is truly getting more and more chaotic. But one more seer among the Night Walkers isn't a bad thing. Follow me, young man. Once he was done talking, he opened a door at the back of the blacksmith shop, Marvin in tow. The room in the back of the blacksmith shop was surprisingly very different from the previous messy room. It was neat, clean, and tidy here. A painting was hanging from a wall, apparently cleaned very often. There were a total of 18 candles that were already lit. It seemed that they were always lit. Marvin watched for a moment. Even if these candles weren't that long, they were very resistant to fire. There were long ones and short ones. As you can see, there are only 18 night walkers remaining in all of Feinan, including me. Our numbers lessen day by day. Every time a candle is extinguished, a night walker has left this world. The old man's voice was grave. Marvin nodded. Out of the corner of his eyes, he noticed an extinguished candle standing at the edge of the 18 lit candles. That was a member who died recently. I still didn't have time to bury his candle, the old man said in a sad voice. I already lost my fighting abilities, or else I would avenge him. He was killed by the Twin Snakes cult's Crimson Patriarch. He was tracking these evil followers, but fell in their trap. If you really become a night walker, you'd take his position. Thus, you'll kill the Crimson Patriarch. This is your fate. Understood. Marvin calmly nodded. He knew that the Night Walker class wasn't that simple. Not only they were an organization, they apparently had some kind of mission which made them guard the continent. Night Walkers were unusually united. They called each other brothers. They were the subordinates of the Night Monarch in an ancient era, and they had always believed in an ancient creed. In peacetime, they chose to live in seclusion. At some particular time, they would display their powers to the world. Regarding Night Walkers, Marvin's knowledge was actually lacking. During the game, he only knew that there was a short sentence when that class appeared as an update. Night is coming. Those 3 words were the maxim of the Night Walker organization. This was also a prophecy. In short, this was an unusual organization. They were leaning toward justice, but hiding in the shadows. Of course, the current you isn't qualified to talk about this. The old man's sight moved away from the candle. It's true that seers are people with outstanding potential, but not every seer can become a night walker. You need to go through some tests of your abilities, moral character, willpower, and other aspects. And in the course of the tests, you might die. Understood. Marvin nodded resolutely. If he couldn't overcome those dangers, he would make a sorry ruler of the night. Good. The old man saw Marvin's firm attitude and praised him for the first time. Night walkers disregarded origins. They only pursued their creed, which was to protect Feinan when the night came. For this reason, the Night Monarch from ancient times left many treasures behind. The old man opened a side door. The interior looked similar to a surgery room. Before we start the first test, I'll give you something. Go in, lie down, focus. Don't do anything else. Marvin was somewhat nervous, but still followed the old man's command. He laid down in that chair, as if he was patient waiting to have his tooth removed. The old man looked for something for a while, and then slowly went behind Marvin. No matter what you see, don't panic, he emotionlessly said. Those are nothing but illusions. The next second, everything turned dark. A black bandage was covering his eyes. Suddenly, a burning pain was transmitted to his eyes, and he could hear the old man chanting something beside his ear. He felt like the world was spinning. Marvin only felt extreme pain. He was stiff from head to foot, but he didn't move. He firmly clenched his teeth, moist liquid flowing from his eyes. He was unclear whether it was tears or blood. An illusion started to appear before his eyes. A red-hot fireball kept rolling in front of his eyes. Within the fireball was a dark shadow. That person had a cold expression and was extremely crafty. He was holding a dagger in his hand and suddenly disappeared in a ray of light. But the shadow was still there. Marvin saw himself and saw his own back. That shadow suddenly appeared and plunged his dagger in the middle of his back. He felt an extreme pain in his chest. It's an illusion, he told himself. But this didn't lessen the pain. He knew that man. It was shockingly the shadow prince he was so familiar with. The burning and the illusion alternately attacked Marvin's nerves for no less than an hour before the old man's whispering was over. The bandage was removed. Marvin was covered with sweat. Your constitution is way too low, the old man said, dissatisfied. You should come and learn how to forge from me. Marvin forced a smile as he opened his eyes, only seeing a blur. My eyes. What happened? He blinked. It was blurry at first, but then everything became extremely clear. Hold on. This was clearly still in the darkness. As a night walker, how could you not have dark vision? The eyes the night monarch gave us are far greater than the dark vision which appeared from living in underground environments. You should properly experience it. You are well rested. It's time for your first test. The old man then handed a scroll to Marvin. Marvin was looking at his surroundings, both startled and pleased. He actually received dark sight. He hurriedly looked at his logs. You accepted the night monarch's blessing. Illusion test in progress. Pain test in progress. You received dark sight. Dark sight, not dark vision. What was called dark vision was nothing more than being able to see a certain distance in the darkness with the help of magic or items. Even within the range of dark vision, it wouldn't necessarily be clear. But dark sight was different. This was real sight. In other words, Marvin could clearly see things in the darkness as if it was daytime. And after becoming a night walker, he could see further and clearer. This was a night walker's strength. In distant places, within mysterious countries, those dark elves inherently possessed infrared vision. Outstanding high-level fighters had the powerful, improved hearing and blind fighting and other skills. But in front of dark sight, everything was subpar. Even the darkness-type blinding skill couldn't do anything in front of dark sight. From that point on, the night couldn't cover Marvin's eyes. Excited after the event, Marvin calmed himself down. Night walkers in the real world were apparently a lot stronger than in the game. Not just the organization, but also the inheritance of the Night Monarch itself was extremely difficult to deal with. Not only would becoming a Night Walker advance his class, it also could let him rope in a powerful organization. Marvin's goals didn't conflict with those of the Night Walker organization. Both sides could completely work together. Still have to go through the Night Walker test first. I heard that Night Walker's examination was very harsh, Marvin thought. He opened the scroll. An assignment was written inside in common language. When Marvin finished reading, his expression immediately changed. Meanwhile, in his quest menu, one more advancement. Night Walker quest appeared. This meant that ever since he obtained dark sight, his advancement had already begun and he couldn't back out. Advancement, Night Walker. Mission 1, Ability Check. Every Night Walker is an expert chosen among the elite. They work well alone, and especially during the night, the other class holders aren't their match. To become a Night Walker, you have to display outstanding strength. Mission Objective, Marcus Thieves Society. Mission Requirement, kill every member of the Thieves Society mentioned above. Time limit, a week. Mission Reward, passing the first test, 1500 General EXP. Below there was a detailed description regarding the mission. Marcus Thieves Society was occupying a strange barren hill in the west of Oaktown, bordering the deathly silent hills. This Thieves Society was made up of 5 members. They were all experts in solo fights, but they formed the Thieves Society due to having various kinds of arrest warrants. In short, this was a group of very troublesome guys. But the old man's request was still for Marvin to kill these 5 guys in a week. A bit troublesome. Marvin frowned, but he didn't hesitate and directly left the blacksmith shop, taking advantage of the night to start the operation.